the first 100K I ever played. It was Poker Masters 100K in Vegas. I think there's 6 left. I played this hand where Stefan Sontheimer opens the cutoff. I 3-bet the button with pocket kings. And somehow, some way, remember this is my first time playing a big final table on stream. Somehow, some way, Christian Christner cold 4-bets the big blind, but I somehow miss it. Like I just don't even realize it happens. And I think it's back on Stefan. So I'm looking at Stefan, he's over to my right. And I'm just paying attention to him because he takes a second and then he folds and I just muck. So I have kings and this is at the final table 6-handed. So I just muck kings to this like cold 4-bet off like 40 big blinds. And I'm just like, the dealer kind of looks at me and like, it's just, I'm just kind of like a deer in headlights, like this big light, like lights everywhere, like big stream final table. Like first time I'd played big, I had sold a ton of action obviously. And I was just like, what the fuck? Like, what do I do now?
Today, we are joined by high stakes live MTT player Seth Davies.
My primary game was 45-man and 90-man sit and goes on full tilt. I think I had like a 2 or 3K bankroll. That was all I needed to kind of continue. And I would cash out 500 a week and that's how I would survive.
Today, he consistently competes in the highest and toughest MTTs in the world and has recently taken down his first bracelet in the 250k WSOP Super High Roller. It was a long road to success with many missteps and lessons learned along the way.
We're talking about a world-class competition, right? Like there is no higher level. And there are situations where you have to be willing to look stupid, whether it's, some exploit or just, it might be good at equilibrium. You might have like some crazy bluff catcher or bluff or value bet or like, any other type of hand that might look really stupid, but like you have to have the confidence to pull the trigger on that. And if you don't do that, you're just gonna be too passive. You're gonna get run over and no one's ever gonna call you when you bet because you're just like never gonna have a bluff.
Thank you guys for tuning in to what's going to be another great episode of the Mechanics of Poker podcast. Quick announcement, we have seats open for our Mechanics of Poker coaching program. If you want to work with me and Adam and have us help you make more progress in your poker career, you can apply using the link down below or go over to mechanicsofpoker.com. Without further ado, guys, enjoy this episode.
Seth, congratulations on what's been an incredible year so far, taking down your first Triton title and finally capturing that WSOP bracelet. The trophies and big scores are, of course, always what draw the attention. That's what everyone sees, right, on the surface. But what most people don't see is that your first Triton event, I looked it up, was back in 2019. And then it took over 103 events. And I'm sure multiple bullets. And at some point, I recall even losing like a big percentage of your net worth on previous trips before finally taking one down. Now, obviously, rationally, if you have an edge, right? We're all poker players, try to think rational. If you have an edge, you just keep showing up and the win should eventually come. But that's obviously easier said than done. So I'm curious, what do you think is it that allows you to keep showing up and try again despite results not going your way? Why do you refuse to give up?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing with that is just your support system. The guys around you. I've been lucky enough to make, really close friends with some of the longest tenured and most successful MTT players out there. So when you have guys around you that are like, hey, we see what you're going through. We've been through it too. We know that you're capable of winning. And just having that is what keeps you going. And then like, as far as minor downswings and slow patches go, at least now, I felt what it feels like to go on a major heater. So it's like you know what it feels like to see the light at the end of the tunnel, where sometimes you don't, where you feel like you're just kind of stuck in the mud. But having some sense of what the top end of it feels like kind of gets you through it. And then obviously the people is what is the most important.
When you're stuck in the mud, what's like the first things that you start to notice about maybe the way you feel or how it starts to affect your play?
I mean, the first thing I always notice is just, I feel much more tense and less free about bluffing. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't say I'm a guy who's ever been like scared of bluffing or, running some big bluff in any spot. I don't think it's ever been a fear thing. It's just a low confidence thing. It's like if I'm on the final table bubble of a 200K and I've lost $2 million in the last couple months. It's like, it's a big spot. Like my stack's worth a lot. Like maybe I should just sit on it here. But like when things are going well, you don't feel that way. You're like, what happened? Like if I lose, I lose. Like that's a real thing. We're human. That's something we can't deny. And the people that are able to still take that bluff on the final table bubble of a 200K while they're on a downswing, like that's what separates like the real greats from just the good players.
How do you do that? How do you overcome it?
Well, for me, this is something that I've actually thought about a lot and worked on in the last 6 months or so, is that I've kind of adopted this mindset of, I've basically felt the worst of it. I've bubbled the giant tournaments. I've gone on the huge downswings, and I came out and I was still there. Like people still had confidence in me. People still thought I was a winner. So it's kind of like at that point you're like, what's the worst that can happen? Like what? Like I've been through the worst of it. So like, what am I scared of? That's the attitude I've adopted, and it's like it's really helped me.
That is shown, yes, or maybe a little bit coincidence that results also started to turn around. Did you feel when you kind of adopted that mindset to kind of change the perspective? Did you feel maybe like a relief of maybe a certain amount of pressure, and therefore it allowed you to play more freely?
Yeah, 100%. It's there's always going to be pressure there, just because. I mean, it's almost more about the structure of how the schedule works, where it's like, okay, this is day 10 of a Triton. I've just played $1 million in buy-ins and haven't cashed anything. So that's heavy on you. But what was I getting at? Like the pressure is always going to be there. But like if you kind of adopt this type of mindset and think like, okay, I'm here, I'm going to play my best, and I'm going to feel like it doesn't matter whether I win or lose. Winning or losing are the same thing as far as I'm concerned, because it's just what I can control. If you can really lean into that mindset, which is extremely hard to do and nobody does it perfectly, but if you can lean into that, that's how you just, kind of escape from some of the pressure,
Do you do any specifics to get yourself in that mindset?
Well, the biggest thing for me is just movement, like in my downtime in between tournaments, for me to keep outside of this, or to keep my mind out of this, like really pressurized, very kind of smothered mindset. I just got to like exercise. I love playing tennis. Any type of like cardio exercise, I feel snaps me out of that, where I get the blood rate or the pulse rate going up high for a long period of time. That's always what snaps me out of it. And it's always been like the best tool I have to keep myself kind of steady and in the right mindset.
So it's like a reset for you.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Try to do it every day if I can.
Yeah, because I can definitely relate, especially for me personally, if I have, for example, nothing that I'm working on in poker and I'm just playing, I feel like the results is kind of the only thing that kind of can satisfy me. And I notice when, for myself, if I have like strategical novel things I'm interested in, like, oh, I'm going to sit down to them, I'm interested to pay more attention to this spot or to this thing, I notice I kind of can let go of results. I'm no longer result oriented because I've become very process oriented, because I've sit down in this session. I'm sitting here because I'm excited to try out all these things that I learned. Can you maybe relate with that as well? Like from a strategical perspective or?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's always one of the things I've always kind of fantasized about, is like studying a specific spot, maybe the night before, the morning of a tournament, and then like that exact spot coming up with like the same board or whatever. So it's kind of that, it's kind of the same mindset, right? Where you're immersed in the process and trying to give as much of your attention as you can to that, rather than letting the results dictate your feeling of well-being, your feeling of happiness, because I do have some friends that are very bad at that, I would say. Elite players, like, so you get like, of all the elite players I know, you get this section of guys that they are so kind of tied to how it's going. It's not like, how can I describe this? Like, they're so competitive and their self-worth is so derived from both their results and how people view them, like their respect in the game, I should say. These are people that are like very high performers and it just means a lot to them to be respected as one of the best players. And what this does is it drives them to be extremely good. These are the type of guys who, I would compare to like the Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant type guys who they absolutely refused to lose, absolutely refused to like accept any mistakes. And it drives them to be extremely successful, but it also gets them very much wrapped up in the mindset we're kind of talking about earlier, where it's like very pressurized, very, very smothered by this like pursuit of perfection. So I wouldn't put myself in that group, and I think it will keep me from ever truly being like a true tier 1 player, like a top 5 player. I don't think I'll ever quite make it into that group because I don't have that, and all the guys I know who are in that group, they do have that. So it does handicap me in a way, but at the same time, it's like, I don't want that. and the guys who I know who are like that, they say that they're like, hey, you don't want this, like it's so hard to be satisfied and content. And it's just so much darkness and negativity that you don't want it, but it definitely leads to results,
Yeah, I can definitely imagine that if every time you play, you care so much what other people think, and it's just so important, it just adds a lot of pressure. Despite that, is there something that you took from these guys that maybe stands out to you? Like, obviously, that's the part you don't want to necessarily take over, but is there something else you're like, hey, this is definitely a trait that I see in these top elite players that I definitely need to adapt?
Yeah, I think the way that those guys evaluate themselves is the most important thing I've learned. They might be a little overly self-critical, but they're also, I find oddly enough, they're very open to their own successes as well. Like I like that those type of guys, they really pay attention not only to mistakes they might have made, but also to great hands that they have played. And I think that's really, really important. And that's a good thing to pay attention to. I kind of like to, as like a day-to-day allegory to this, it's kind of like sometimes when you have a lot to do, your life kind of just feels like one big to-do list, and you feel like you're not getting anywhere. You're just kind of checking things off the list. And it's kind of like if you hold a separate list, it's like, this is what I've done. It's like, oh, okay, like these things are stacking up. I'm actually accomplishing a lot. And if you just pay attention to the stuff I've done wrong or haven't done yet, it might feel like you're in this never-ending hamster wheel. And these guys that, they pay attention to the mistakes, but they also pay attention to the good hands. I feel like that's a very good way to kind of escape from that hamster wheel type feeling. And I've learned a lot from people because of that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, like recognizing the progress. Yeah. Like there's all these pieces of evidence that you can use also to build a lot of confidence in your game. But if you just always kind of brush that off, it's like, okay, finally I got that right, and focus only on the negatives. Yeah, at some point it might feel like you're only doing things wrong, right? It's just a matter of what you shed your light on. You talked about,
the other thing. Mm-hmm. One last thing I would say about that too, that's interesting, is that the better you get at poker, and the better you get at anything really, is all of the things you do right start to feel easier and easier, right? So it feels like, oh, obviously I got that right. But it's not so obvious. And it's something that people that aren't at an elite level did not get right. So it's very easy to kind of feel like, oh, obviously I should get that right, to everything you get right, and not celebrate your wins when like you should celebrate things, because it's not that simple. You're just really good at it.
Yeah, it's funny, right? It's like maybe a I don't know what, like a familiarity bias. Like, oh yeah, I know this now, and then you kind of like, yeah, this is sort of standard now, right? Like I assume everyone knows that, and then maybe you explain it to someone else, like, oh wow, this is like mind blowing stuff. It's like, well, it's pretty standard, right? So if you kind of brush all these things off, it's like, yeah, you're doing yourself short.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, we talked about obviously the difficulties of, when you're in downswing. Now you're actually on the other spectrum, right? Over the last 6 months, I know you've done very well. If you look at the other side of the coin, does that bring with it its own dangers and maybe things that you have to manage? Like kind of the upswing tilt of the game?
Yeah, winner's tilt is absolutely real. And the biggest thing about winner's tilt is kind of like that example I said earlier, where you're at the final table bubble of a huge tournament, and you're now willing to make a big bluff because you're kind of confident feeling yourself and not so worried about losing. But if you take that too far, it's going to get expensive really quick. So that's the most obvious part of winner's tilt, is like, all right, keep the train on the tracks. Don't just like go out of your mind every single time you're trying to do something, unorthodox or out of the box. And you see guys do this, and it can get dark in a hurry.
So you talked about the downswing Seth, would maybe skip on a bluff here and there. The upswing Seth pulls too many bluffs.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. Try not to. Try to keep it in the lane, but we'll see.
Is this something that you also take in consideration in the field around you? That you look at like, okay, these are guys that are currently crushing, they're in an upswing, or these guys are in a downswing. Do you try to pay attention to like these subtleties, like, and do you try to like maybe pick up on reads, like, okay, he doesn't really look the sharpest, and usually when he's bid down, he's likelier to spew off or call down or something along those lines? Is that something you look for?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very real. We're dealing with the best players in the world, but they're also humans. And like I said before, you're on day 10 of a Triton where you've just lost $1 million. You're tired. You haven't slept well in 2 weeks. That's part of it too. You got to pay attention to who looks rested, who looks just like withered and over it, and want to go home, and other people that are really locked in. So that's a big part of the kind of soft skill aspect of tournaments and poker in general. And the people that are great at that, it's a really, really good source of edge for them. And I do feel it's something that I've come a long ways on in the last handful of years. And yeah, it's the longer I go with high stakes tournaments, the more I realize how human they really are. And that's a big part of it, is just keeping track of how people are feeling and how they look,
Is this something that you cannot really shortcut? It's something you need with experience. I guess it's like kind of the process of knowing what makes you tick and knowing, like, becoming more aware. And I guess the only way you practice is that with experience.
Yeah, I mean, experience is everything in a situation like that. The biggest part of experience is, in that sense, is that you start to feel when you're going off the rails. You start to know what the feeling is like when, like, okay, I am not thinking clearly right now. Because that's what do they say about, that's the most pronounced thing about, sleep deprivation or being drunk or what, impaired in any way. The thing where humans are really terrible at is being self-aware of that. Like, we still think we're operating at a good level, even though we're drunk or tired or whatever. So, and that's 100% real in poker, with tiredness, tilt, whatever the emotional state may be. So being able to recognize that in yourself and be like, okay, I am not all here. I need to not have 100% confidence that I picked up some live read when, I only slept for 2 hours last night, and I'm not like necessarily doing that well with my attention. So that's a very real thing.
Yeah, also maybe a good thing for our audience, because it's easy to kind of beat yourself up when you're like, oh, fuck, I noticed, that I'm playing bad again. But you can also flip that perspective, right? Hey, you did notice. That means it's good. Maybe in the past you would have noticed it a month in. Now you notice it 2 weeks in. That's huge progress, right? And that's in the end, like, we cannot... I like what you said, like staying on track, because we cannot stay on track. We're always going to the right or to the left, right? It's how far we go from the right to the left and how fast we can course correct. I think that shows that you're making progress as a player. And in the end, even the elite players, they go off track.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that self-awareness is like the cornerstone of self-discipline, right? And self-discipline is enormously important in tournaments for the same reasons we talked about, not going on winner's tilt and punching it off or anything. And the first step of that is being self-aware.
Adam, how do we keep the train on track the best we can? Any tips for our audience? I'm sure everyone's listening. Oh, I just need to keep the train on the track. Easier said than done.
That's right.
I mean, Seth gave away the secret there. It's all awareness. So you've got to like kind of spot your tendencies as they show up. The sooner you spot them, the sooner you can implant some new strategy, change your routine. But very often it's like, as Seth mentioned, we will drift off course without realizing, whether it's through fatigue, whether it's through results not going our way, and we convince ourselves that things are going well. When in reality, if we could spot the early warning signs, then we need to get good at changing behaviors, because a lot of things when we are in compromised states, we need to do things differently. So if Seth hasn't slept before a big high roller, he probably shouldn't be making those hero calls or those big exploits in these really tough spots, but without awareness, he's going to. So yeah, I think, to be honest, like, awareness is the only skill you really need to work on. And then from there, as Seth mentioned, discipline to change behaviors, because one's the awareness, but then it's like, what do you do with that awareness? So yeah, I think we'll come back to that a bit later, because there's so much to dive into.
Take a look at this hand that I played. Cutoff opens, I flat the bottom with 7-5 suited and the small blind comes along. We go to a flop of 6-5-4. Small blind checks and the cutoff makes a c-bet. Is this standard? I'm not really sure. Nowadays though, we can find out what is actually the correct strategy in multi-way pots due to a big update that GTO Wizard has released in which we can solve multi-way. Now the first thing that we notice is that the small blind is actually supposed to dunk 58% of the time. If it does go check towards the initial raiser, he should not be doing any c-betting, which kind of explains why the small blind wants to dunk. If it does c-bet, it's 1% of the time that he's supposed to do it. We can see that 5-7 is indeed sometimes okay to raise. However, the c-bet frequency is obviously not really representative for what I think we saw in game, so we can go over to the node lock function and up his c-bet frequency and see what that does to our strategy. Something that's interesting to note is that now the small blind went from dunking 58% to only dunking 33%. If the small blind does check and the cutoff c-bets, we can actually see that 7-5 suited now mainly prefers to call. This is probably partly due to the fact that the cutoff puts a lot of money in with quite strong hands, but mainly for the fact that the small blind is now checking way more hands towards him, and therefore we're up against two ranges that are actually pretty strong. So taking in consideration that I thought in game it was probably close to a range check, it's very easy to be over c-betting. Therefore I decided to raise the flop, blocking the main hands that villain could be happy with facing a raise. Think of 5-6 suited, pocket 5s or 7-8. If he has an overpair, I think he's straight away in a tough spot. And even if he would call with an overpair, I still have a lot of outs. However, what I did not take in consideration in game is that the small blind, especially if he doesn't lead, maybe because he also thinks the cutoff is going to c-bet too much, is very much uncapped. If you combine all multi-way pots in your regular 6 max game, it actually is a pretty big contributor to your win rate. And if you play big anti-games or live, the number of multi-way pots that you're going to play is going to go through the roof. So given the frequency with which it's occurred, the fact that it's a little bit of a bigger pot than regular single race pots, and the fact that it's a very unexplored field, makes studying multi-way a very big opportunity to gain an edge in today's games. So go check them out, gtowizard.com/mechanics to get 10% off of your first subscription. But without further ado, let's get back into today's episode.
Yeah, Seth, I want to take the audience on your journey to being a poker player. I know your background's been very spread out in terms of doing sports, doing other things leading into poker. So yeah, I want to jump into your journey in your sports days. So growing up, you did 2 competitive sports. How did that early competition shape your life and your stepping into poker?
Yeah, so I would put the number at more than 2. The 2 sports that I was the best at were both swimming and track. I was top 10 in the nation in the US in both swimming and track when I was younger, but I quit pretty young. And when I was about 14, 15, when high school started, because I wanted to play other sports because swimming and track aren't very fun. but yeah, I came from a pretty successful swimming family. Cousins were, I had one cousin swim in the Olympic trials, and my brother and other cousins were Division I swimmers. For those that don't know, that's like the highest level of university swimming in America, which is like basically as high as swimming goes outside the Olympics. But so yeah, swimming, and then track was this is kind of funny. This is me kind of bragging, but whatever. It's a funny story. I grew up with a guy named Ashton Eaton. He was 2-time Olympic gold medalist and former world record holder in the decathlon. And Ashton was 1 year older than me. I actually broke Ashton's middle school long jump record. So that's my track claim to fame. But I mean, he obviously ended up being like a much better athlete than I ever could have been, but pretty funny story. And then, so yeah, then I ended up playing football, American football, basketball, and baseball throughout high school, and eventually played baseball in university for a couple years before I started playing poker full time. So yeah, baseball was the one I played the longest, but I was definitely better at swimming and track.
How did this early sports background shape your competitive drive and also your ability to handle pressure? Myself, I grew up in a running family. Everyone was a middle distance runner. So from the age of 11, I was competing in races around the country, and I quickly took on the pressure of, oh, I'm a runner, need to represent the family, need to do well. I imagine for you with like elite swimmers in your family, very quickly without realizing, it's like Seth's got to perform, Seth's got to show up. How did that early exposure to that shape you, and also what were some of the challenges with that?
Yeah, so I had a swim coach from when I was very young, up until I guess I was probably about 7, 8 years old, up until I was 13 or 14. I quit swimming at 13, I think. And I think he was arguably, I would put him in this group of three, the three most influential people in my life as far as becoming a competitor and eventually influencing on me becoming a poker player. Because this swim coach, he was very good. He produced bunch of fantastic swimmers from a relatively small city. The city I grew up in is about 50,000 people, and we would consistently compete with the clubs from the big cities that had 2-3 million people. So it was a remarkably successful small club. And the thing about this coach was he was just very hard. From a very early age, he did not accept any type of poor effort from you. So when you're 6 or 7, 8, 9 years old, getting screamed at by this coach that, like, you're not working hard enough. It just shapes you in a way where it's like, okay, I know exactly what a good effort looks like. And I know exactly how hard I need to work to win, to beat people that are very, very good and also working very, very hard. So I would put this guy in very high up. And my brother was kind of the same way. I have 2 older brothers, and my oldest was 4 years older than me. He was a very successful swimmer as well. He always was pissed that I broke all his records, but he was the same way. Just always rode my ass if I didn't do well. But these 2 guys also, I think this is a very, very important thing too. My brother and this coach, they were also very good at celebrating like when I did great, and that was something that also shaped me, because that made me want to be there. It made me want to. It gives you like, if you just have like, say, an abusive dad or coach or whatever that just is always down on you, always hating on your bad performance, but never giving you the support when you do well, you just don't want to be there. You just want to quit and you hate it, So these guys were able to instill in me that the positive side of being competitive, where it's like, okay, you work for it, you put in the time, you put in the effort, you're going to get the celebration, you're going to get the happiness out of it. So yeah, I'm really grateful for both those guys.
You mentioned the coach being very kind of structured, disciplined, pushing you hard. You mentioned your brother having an influence on you as well. What was young Seth wanting to do there? What was he trying to achieve? Was he wanting to be seen? Was he wanting to achieve things? Did you have dreams of being an athlete, a swimmer, and all these kind of domains?
Yeah, for me, it was just my whole life was sports for up until I was 18 years old. Like, obviously I went to school and I did well in school just because school's super easy. But yeah, everything, my entire childhood and adolescence was always about sports. I wouldn't say I was particularly driven to impress anybody or to get notoriety. Obviously that motivated me. It was cool to like see my name in the newspaper and win championships and things like this. But for me, it was all just very natural. It was all just very much felt like what I was supposed to be doing. I was always good at it. I always enjoyed working hard. Obviously you had the dark days where you're getting yelled at. That wasn't so fun, but it was just part of the thing. It just felt like what I was built to do. It just felt like what I belonged doing. So it was just very natural for me.
Then you went to college to do baseball, and you picked up multiple injuries where you needed many surgeries. And at some point, you have to give up being an athlete. So I'm imagining for you, this must have been a very tough period. You said sports were everything till 18. And I know when your identity is attached to something, especially from a young age, it's really hard to move on from that. So when you were picking up these injuries, I'm guessing there was an element of denial that you could keep pushing through them. But how were you navigating, coming to terms with the fact that, okay, injuries are starting to kick in and maybe I won't make it in baseball as I thought I would?
Yeah, so that's something that's a period of time that I've held a lot of regret in for a long time. And only until very recently have I kind of changed my mindset about it. So this was the period from when I was about 18 years old to about 21 years old. I had five surgeries. 5 surgeries from injuries. And throughout this time, this is when I was starting to play poker. This was 2007 to 2010. So this was peak online poker in the US. And this was where I was very much learning and progressing into becoming a professional poker player. And even, the time I was spending recovering from those surgeries were the time I spent the most time playing poker and really where I started to support myself. But yeah, that was a time when I was kind of one foot in the door in each, right? Like I was spending a lot of time on poker and not spending as much time as I should have been on my body and baseball and getting back into it. And the main reason just being because I was so obsessed with poker at the time. I was starting, it was the first time I'd ever made real money. You know, I came from a family, like we weren't like super poor, but like we were like lower middle class. You know, my dad was a truck driver. My mom was a dental hygienist. Like we lived month to month. Like I didn't come from a privileged family or anything. So this was the first time I had money. I was making, you know, like a couple $1,000s a month. I was like, oh, this is incredible. Like I'm making real money. And so I was so obsessed with it, but obviously that led to me not working so hard to get back in baseball. And then after I had like my third arm surgery, and it became clear that baseball was over, it was really sad. Like I remember that day very clearly, the day I decided to hang it up. And that was, you know, very, very tough day. And for the last, I mean, for 10, 15 years after that, I would say that I always really regretted it, leaving potential on the table in baseball, because I you know, at least could have played. Like I'm not saying I would have ever played in the major leagues and been like like, you know, that kind of thing, but I definitely had years left in the tank. But just in the last couple of years, I've really come around to the fact that like things worked out all right, you know. And if I would have really given that effort at baseball at the time, maybe I would have played for 5 more years, and then maybe I would have never been a pro poker player. So I've become a lot more grateful for how things played out, and a lot more kind of content with the closure of my life as an athlete. And that's very recent, and I would say in the last couple of years. So yeah, something I really hated for a long time about how it went, but nowadays have a lot more gratitude for how it did go.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of factors were out of your control in that environment in terms of the injuries, and how much you could have pushed through was probably debatable. But yeah, I feel like people don't realize how much like these big shifts in like what you do like really feel like a death. It's like an ego death, or a part of yourself dies in that moment. And if you haven't found a way to kind of close the story in your own mind to get some sort of peace with it, it can leave this like unfinished chapter of a book that keeps going on and on. So yeah, I could imagine for you in terms of coming to terms with that, probably took a long time, but it feels like now like the transition had set you up for, you can accept that and also be happy with it. So in terms of like the sports background into poker, what are some of the main overlaps? What does sports teach you that really transitions into being a good poker player?
Yeah, the most important thing that sports taught me, I think, is resilience. You like the most successful people in poker and in pretty much anything that I can think of, at least, but poker is where I have the most experience, is people are willing to get back up after they get knocked down. And there's nothing that teaches that better to you than sports. You know, you can absolutely dedicate a year, 2 years, 4 years into like one competition and losing, or maybe getting injured a month before it or something like that. You go through these like, and you know, when you're at the time, when you're a teenager or whatever, and like I was saying, this was everything. My entire identity was something like this. And to lose a season because I broke my hand, like it was completely devastating, but you know, came back the next year and, you know, bounced back. So in poker, you obviously have to deal with tons and tons of defeat and losing and everything. And if you aren't prepared to deal with that, it's going to go very dark for you very quick, and you're probably not going to make it. So yeah, I would say for sure that's the best skill that sports taught me.
How do you learn to become more resilient? So you mentioned there kind of bouncing back, coming back and just keep showing up. But a lot of people struggle with this. A lot of people struggle with that ability to handle adversity, handle tough times, and just keep showing up in a way that's proactive. Because I think you can show up in 2 ways. You can kind of show up and just go for the motions, or you can show up, want to learn, want to improve, want to get better, use every setback as a way to drive you forwards. So for you, when you are going through tough times, in terms of being resilient, anything that comes to mind in terms of things you tell yourself, things you do to make sure that when you go through hard times, you're always learning from them?
Yeah, so I mean, the most important thing with resilience is just experience. It's really hard to just kind of mind strength your way through it. I mean, I guess that's what you're doing in the end, but if like you just have to live in the mud, like we were saying sometimes, like you just have to, like when you're down there, that's the important part, I would think, is like the people who kind of wallow in their own self-pity when things are going bad. These are the people that are the least resilient and have the toughest time bouncing back. So if anybody's like really struggles with this, I think what they should really focus in on is never, ever, ever feel bad for yourself. And whenever you get that feeling, like force yourself to go do something. Like if you're thinking like, God, I've lost 10 flips in a row. What, like, why me? Why me? When is it going to be my time? Like force yourself to go study extra hard that day, or force yourself to just do something extra, because that is like the absolute worst thing you can do is like wallow in your own self-pity and think, why me? Why me? Everybody else is lucky. I'm unlucky. Because like, you just can't get through it if that's your attitude. And I think that's an easy way, because it's very easy to know when you're feeling that. And we all feel that, you know, don't for a second think I'm somebody who's sitting there like never feeling bad for myself. But if you outwardly do that, or let yourself kind of fester in it, that's when it gets really toxic, and you're just becoming like a worse player and a less resilient human in the process, you know?
Yeah, that's really good advice. I think it's acknowledging we all feel similar emotions in these states. But then what do you do next? Do you wallow in it, or do you go to the gym? Do you start a study session? Do you use that uncomfortable feeling to drive action? I think athletes are very good at this, because the athlete's mindset's always everything's training. I need to get better. I need to improve. So you don't perform well. It's not like I suck. It's like, oh, didn't perform well today. How can I get better tomorrow? And you instantly take that feeling into a training session, into the gym, into getting better. Whereas other people who haven't learned that kind of connection can feel those same things and then not really know what to do with it. Where the athlete's like, oh, I need to train. I feel shit about myself. I best get to the gym. I best get working. So yeah, I think it's something that if people don't have a sports background, they probably need to learn it more proactively. But yeah, I love the advice of not wallowing and just do something, take action, move forward. So for you, in terms of sports, any big role models you had? Obviously, your brother you mentioned your swim coach. Any sort of athletes that were inspirational to you growing up?
Well, I mentioned like Michael Jordan and Kobe before. Like I always looked at those guys as not necessarily something to aspire to, but kind of this like almost like deified picture of what a competitor is. You know what I mean? They were almost like, and I mean, I still kind of believe this. They're so like larger than life in what their attitude was towards competing. Like those were always guys that kind of always come to mind when you think about like who made you want to work hard and everything. So it wasn't so much, you know, like I was saying, it wasn't so much of like, I want to be these guys, but it's just like, this is the model of what a competitor is, you know?
That transition into full-time poker, you mentioned the injuries were starting to stack up and you were already playing poker at the time. When did you decide that poker was going to be the full-time thing?
Yeah, so this was the fall of 2010. So I would say 2009 or so was when I was starting to support myself strictly from poker. I remember I was playing, my primary game was 45 man and 90 man sit and goes on full tilt. I would cash out $500 a week. I think I had like a 2 or 3K bankroll. That was all I needed to kind of continue. And I would cash out 500 a week, and that's how I would survive. And then through 2009 and 10, I continued doing like the multi-table sit and goes and also some MTTs. And then yeah, it was that fall of 2010. I remember in August, because that's when the baseball season starts. The actual season is in the spring, but your first kind of training period is, we call it fall ball, is in August, September, October. And I was about 2 weeks in and tore my rotator cuff, and that was it. And yeah, and then like I was pretty much immediately, well, I was already still playing poker a lot, but pretty much immediately was like, okay, this is it, full time. Here we go. And within a month, I had like the biggest score of my career. At the time, I had about a 5K bankroll, and I would play primarily 180 man turbo sit and goes on Poker Stars. They were awesome. They had $11 and $33. And I would play like 5,000 a month. I was a big grinder. I'd play 25, 30 tables at a time with those plus low stakes MTTs. But and then on Sundays, I would take my FPPs. If anybody goes back that far, that was the reward token on Stars way back then. I would take my FPPs on Sundays and buy tickets to play the Sunday Million, the Sunday Warm Up, and the Sunday Second Chance. And then I won the Sunday Second Chance within a month of that going full time. It was for like 50,000 or something. So I had this 5K bankroll, playing some big tournaments on FPPs, had this huge score, 10x my bankroll, cashed out like all of it. I just kept a 5K bankroll on Stars to continue the same grind. And I was like, 21 at the time. So I like spent all 50K in like 2 months, like a complete dumbass, like partying and everything with my friends. But yeah, that was kind of my introduction to what full-time professional poker was like. It went well right away. So
Yeah. So that 50K score obviously kind of whet your appetite and also let out some reckless behaviors in terms of blowing money for the first time. How did you then start to get your career on track in terms of sustainability? So you mentioned like a bit reckless, but kind of getting by, doing enough. When did you start to piece things together, start to get some more consistent scores? And what were some of the early successes in your poker career?
Yeah, so that happened by necessity pretty quickly. So that was fall 2010, and then in the spring of 2011, I was actually playing baseball in Las Vegas. I left Vegas for back up to Oregon where I grew up to go to school. I was going to go to school and play poker full time. And I remember I signed a year lease at a new apartment, and I think it was like the first week of April in 2011. So if anyone knows where this was going, about 10 days later, Black Friday hits. And I remember being in that apartment playing poker online when Black Friday hit and just being like, oh shit, like what now? And so yeah, that was, every American online pro at that point had a big reckoning. And so I spent that summer, didn't relocate yet in the summer, played WSOP, played a couple live WPTs. And then that July or August, I decided to go ahead and move up to Canada to continue playing. And then it's like, okay, we're very serious now. I've relocated out of the country. I'm away from like virtually all my friends. Had some friends up in Vancouver where I first went. But at that point, it's like, okay, this is very serious. And fortunately for me, it continued to go pretty well. And I continued to progress reasonably quickly as a player, not necessarily climbing the stakes so much, but had plenty of success to continue supporting myself. So it was kind of by necessity that I grew up in a hurry.
You mentioned you started to take things more serious. What were some of the changes you made before and after in terms of that more serious approach?
Yeah, I mean, I went from I was at University of Oregon, which is a big university with a lot of fun, a lot of partying, a lot of friends. So being forcibly taken out of that environment was, a good thing for my professionalism. I just wasn't, getting drunk 5 nights a week anymore. I would still go out a little bit in Vancouver and stuff, but kind of just being taken out of the social environment was good. I was able to kind of focus on just being like, okay, I'll go to the gym, then I'll go play poker. I'll go to the gym, go play poker. And it was great. I loved it. It was a great, I was probably there for 6 months. So yeah, I don't want to pretend like I had some great self-control at like 22 years old at the time. I was still a 22-year-old who liked to party and be stupid and all that stuff. But kind of fortunately for me, I was taken out of that environment. But unfortunately for me, about a year or two later, I moved to Mexico where I spent 4 years. And that's where that kind of early 20s age got the best of me. And I had a couple bad years where I wasn't being so professional. I was drinking a lot because I was down in Playa del Carmen where I moved there on January 1st, 2013, and I was there until 2017. But that first year especially, there was probably 100 American expat poker players in Playa, as well as quite a few Europeans who had come for the time zone, and it was just a good place to be. And that first year, I mean, I was back to just beach, drinking beers every day, not working that hard. And it went bad. That first year was bad. I lost and it was not pretty. And it took me until probably it was Scoop 2014 where I had a lot of success to really get me out of that. But yeah, I went through those early 20s times where, kind of lucky to make it out, honestly. It could have gone really well. My career could have ended a number of times, but fortunately kind of stuck with it and had a good support group around me and made it out.
Yeah, and you were young, figuring stuff out. And I think at that age, myself as well, you're peer group around you, your environment has a big impact. My friends are working hard, say, great, let's grind. My friends are going partying, okay, let's party. So you can very quickly get steered in any direction. So for you, were you still playing tournaments at this time predominantly? Did you experiment with cash games, or were you always playing tournaments?
So I grinded cash full time for like a 6 month, 1 year period. It was right before that scoop. So like it was probably from like late summer 2013 to about scoop spring 2014. I was playing Zoom, six mag Zoom full time, as well as tournaments on Sunday too. And going back real quick, one thing you said is like, you are pulled in so many different directions at that age with, your friends that are partying, some that are playing and everything. And you really saw people kind of fall out of the game at that point. And if you just had some shred of self-discipline, be like, okay, like I am a professional poker player. I'm going to do something. I may be partying a lot too, but like, I'm not just going to let that totally overrun me. And that's something that, kind of going back to that athlete background, I was always, even in my least professional, most kind of party days, like I always like had that little piece of me that was like, okay, like you need to get some work done. Like you can't just do this. You can't just like drinking all day and then showing up drunk to play tournaments. Like that can't be your life. Like you have to play sober. You have to get some work done. You have to go to the gym. So having that kind of forged in me throughout like my whole adolescence, like probably was the most important thing for getting me through those years of dicking around.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Like you might look like you're doing the same as your friends, but that little bit more self-awareness to connect with what you think's real for you, your values, to know what your goals are, I think matters so much. I'm sure for yourself, like say you're drinking 4 or 5 days in a row. I'm guessing you're the guy who's probably thinking, I need to get a workout in, need to get to the gym, need to do something physical, where the other friends might just be kind of going down the path of self-destruction. I definitely think in your early 20s, teen years, having that little bit of self-awareness, that's a little bit of a break to go, right, this can't continue is a bit of a superpower, which probably was the key factor that kept you on the path enough to kind of figure things out. So you mentioned you won a scoop. Which year was that you won that, and how did that scoop title change your trajectory in terms of what you were doing?
Yeah, so that was 2014, and that was one of the real pivotal moments in my career, I would say. So at the time, like I said, 2013 didn't go well for me. I was losing in tournaments. I had lost like the entire second half of 2016 or 2013. I had lost a bit in tournaments. I had quite a bit of makeup. I was winning in cash, which was good. But the tournament makeup added up pretty quickly. I was backed at the time. And then 2014 comes around, and this period where I was grinding cash as my main game, I was also, I was getting coached by Chris Kruk. I don't know if you guys know Chris. He was one of the most influential guys early in this part of my career where I was getting coached by him, and he was the guy who really instilled in me, that poker is not a game of tricks. Poker is a game of fundamentals and having the right hands in the right situations and the right lines. Where up to this point as a just full-time tournament player, I mostly just thought like, I'm going to trap aces here because it's a cool trick and it works out sometimes. It works out pretty often. But he was the guy that really helped me develop through this stretch of both grinding cash and being coached by him. And he's just an incredible poker player, by the way. I know he's mostly just played mixed games for the last like 10 years or so. Thank God, because if he played tournaments, he would be really, really good at him. And I'm glad he isn't playing them. But so yeah, that was a very key part of my career as far as development goes. And then Scoop comes around 2014. I probably had like maybe 40, 50K makeup at the time, playing like, I don't know, average buy-in of somewhere between $100 and $200, I would say. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, Scoop 1K Super Tuesday on PokerStars, won it for about 260,000. So obviously cleared makeup and made some money for myself, and just felt like I had really gotten to a point where I was out of that funk of being just kind of a degenerate party kid, and was like, okay, I spent all these months improving as a player. Here's the validation of that with some results and, obviously money. So that was very pivotal for me.
Did that motivate you to go all in on tournaments around that time? And also, how did that impact like your career going forward? Did you make any more aggressive shot takes, or did you just keep doing what you were doing, realizing that was proof that you were on the right path?
So that was 2014. I continued to basically just grind roughly the same schedule online for a couple years. In 2016 was when I really started playing more live. But I've never been much of a shot taker, I would say. Like there was never really I can't even really remember a single tournament where I was just like, okay, I'm really going for it here. Like this is a good spot. I'm going to go for it. For me, it was always just like, all right, stick to the plan, risk what you feel like you're risking and just keep grinding, trust the process. That was always my approach. And I guess as a tournament player, that's a little bit more natural of an approach. Whereas a cash game player, you're like, okay, I just got into a really good spot. Like this doesn't happen much for me. Like shot taking is much more reasonable. But as a tournament player, it's like, say there's a huge tournament. It's like, okay, I'm going to risk half my bankroll in one tournament. That's just a terrible idea, regardless of how good the tournament is. So for me as a tournament player, is always much more managed and kind of doing the same thing all the way up. So yeah, that was 2014 grinded the rest of the year online. 2015, same thing. Then 2016 kind of opened up more towards the American live tournament scene and had some success. I won a WPT as well as a couple other deep runs in WPTs. So, and then got the big score was chopped four-handed the Florida Big Five. It's called like the Seminole Hard Rock Poker Open. I don't know if they still do it. I think so. This was 2016 though. For it was a 5K. I cashed for like 550K or something. So that combined with winning a WPT was kind of what skyrocketed my live poker career. And ever since then, it was just live poker for me.
You mentioned spending, I think, 3 or 4 years in Mexico. How did that period away from friends, family shape you as a person? I know myself, I moved to Bali in like 22 and it faces for quite a bit of a culture shock, a bit of a scary transition. But during that kind of phase where you're away from friends, family, you kind of find out who you want to be and kind of pick your own path. So for you in Mexico, what were some of the big changes you went through individually?
Yeah, like that you said, find out who you want to be, because that's something that took me a very, very long time. And I definitely did not figure out who I was in my 20s. It took me, I would describe myself throughout my like late teens and 20s as like a pretty self-conscious, kind of timid guy. I was very, very scared of looking stupid, very scared of being embarrassed, like probably most people are. And it took those years in Mexico. I met my wife down there. I made some great friends down there, and being away from all your support system. And well, I moved down there. I didn't have a single, I had one friend down there who was like, okay, like decent friend. Like I didn't have any close friends or anything down there. So it was like really just kind of transplanted completely out of your comfort zone. Or I mean, at that point, I wouldn't even say I really had a comfort zone. I had been away from home ever since Black Friday, a couple years. And it's kind of the same thing as we were talking about with sports, how like you deal with adversity as a young kid, and it kind of hardens you and makes you more resilient. Kind of the same thing happens with traveling and just getting out of your little bubble. It's not necessarily adversity, because traveling's awesome and meeting new people and like making new friends is awesome, but it also like is uncomfortable. So, being forced into, or at least choosing a relatively uncomfortable situation, just makes you more resilient, it gives you this kind of poise, I would say, where it's like, you've been through so many different things that like, you're just not scared of what's going to happen anymore. Like it's just an experience thing where it's like, whatever happens, I'm going to be fine. Like I'm going to be fine. And I guess that's what resilience really is in the end. Right. And that did nothing but help me with that.
Did you have any low points in Mexico? Maybe like missing family, missing friends? I picture like there's a lot of growth that's happening. There's a lot of character development. You're on your own path now. But at the same time, you're also, I know that age as well, like early 20s, you're going off the path that everyone else is on, like living in your hometown, living in your own country. And people are kind of pulling you. I know myself, like friends are messaging me all the time. Hey, Adam, when you coming back? Hey, we're doing this. Oh, we're moving here. And I felt like I was missing out a little bit, but I was also very clear like what I wanted to do. So for you, in terms of living in Mexico, from a personal perspective, was there any challenges in terms of being away from family? And then was there any low points when you maybe hit junior poker career?
Honestly, I'd be lying if I said there was, because I was just having so much fun. Like those years in Mexico were so, so fun. And the first couple years, obviously poker went pretty poorly, but I was still having like the best time of my life. And then once poker actually started going well and I was still having a great time, you know, at that point, you know, I'd been with my now wife for a while now. It was just really nothing but positivity for me those years in Mexico. So I'd be lying if I said I really had some downtime. Obviously, like when poker wasn't going well, I don't think I was ever worried about my career ending. Like I was always confident that it was gonna go well eventually. I was gonna get out of whatever hole I was in. But you know, it did suck to lose at tournaments for months and just build makeup. But yeah, I'd be lying if I said that, you know, I was ever really super homesick or really wanted to be anywhere else just because it was just such a good time. You know, there's a bunch of great friends there, like made a bunch of great friends there. And yeah, it was a hard place to be sad.
What was driving you at this stage? Were you just trying to have a good lifestyle? Did you imagine yourself playing the high rollers at any point? I know you've competitive background, so I'm guessing you were thinking in terms of how good you could get and improving yourself. Yeah, what were some of the main drives for you as a person this period?
Yeah, so I would say I didn't always have my sights necessarily set on climbing the highest stakes, but about this time is when I started getting closer with Jason Koon, and we started working a little bit more together. And we had known each other for a handful of years, but he was kind of fast tracked on the fast track of being, you know, like a truly top player. He kind of already was at this point. This was like 2014, 2015, maybe a little earlier in his career or a little later in his career where he was a true top player. But like I was saying, like you always saw people kind of fall out of the game, you know, like whether they were just guys who partied too much or just lazy or degenerates or whatever. And you really started to recognize people in the industry and in your circles that were similar to you. And me and Jason always really clicked with that because we were surrounded by a lot of guys that, you know, love to party and all this, but we both kind of anchored ourselves towards being competitors and actually caring about being good poker players. So at about this time, say 2015 was when him and I, you know, started continuing to get closer and closer, and I started to improve at a faster rate, and, you know, ROIs went up and success started going up. You know, obviously I had the big 2016 with the live circuit. And yeah, that was when, you know, things started to kind of congeal into terms of what I wanted to do with my life. And I was starting to grow out of the party scene. You know, like I was saying, I had been with my wife for years at this point. And so, you know, I wasn't running around chasing Mexican girls at the bar as much anymore. And I wanted to, just kind of take poker more seriously and kind of progress.
At this stage, what were some of the main goals you set for yourself? Did you envision playing really high stakes in terms of like those next steps for you from Mexico to the next phase? What were some of the things that were on your mind?
Yeah, so at about, say, 2006, late 2015, 2016, I mean, pretty much ever since 2011, it's always been kind of doom and gloom about online poker. I guess it's kind of had a resurgence in the last 5 years, especially with COVID. But up until 2020, like every year, everyone was just like, okay, online poker is getting worse and worse and worse and worse. So what are we going to do now? And what do we want to, how do we want to see ourselves in the future? And for me, that was, you know, 2015, 2016 was the period where I decided like, okay, I'm not going to be an online poker pro anymore. So what do I want to do? And I did have, you know, some vision of, you know, eventually moving up. You know, I'd like to play some softer 25Ks. This was a time when, like, for example, the PCA 25K was gigantic. Obviously have the high rollers at the WSOP. So like I had set my sights on those where I wasn't as obsessed with that, like moving up the stakes. Like I was saying, like I always mostly just wanted to be comfortable. You know what I mean? Like I've never been a guy where it's like, okay, I want to make 10 million in the next 2 years so I could buy a gigantic house and fly private. Okay. Then I want to have 50 million by the time I'm 40. Then I want to have like, I was never one of those guys. Like I've always been conscious of the fact that I'm a pretty simple person and I have simple needs. Like I don't need to be very rich, and I don't want to try to become very rich. You know, I don't care about ever having tens of millions of dollars. It's not a big motivator for me. So for me, I always just wanted to be comfortable, enjoy my time playing poker, make as much money as I could playing tournaments. And yeah, that was all it really was to me.
Are you grinding hard, studying solvers, reviewing hands, but still not getting those results that you know you're capable of? You're putting in the time and effort, but without clear direction, that effort does not pay off. That is why I created the Mechanics Leakbuster program, which is the exact system I use to make over 7 figures playing online poker and have since taught to hundreds of students so they could do the same. Through our leak finder stats and pop-ups, you will gain clarity on your biggest leaks and tendencies, insights on how your strategies have been performing in-game, and the impact variance has had on your results. But knowing your stats is only the beginning. In the program, we dig deep into the root causes behind your leaks and tendencies and use a proven 7-step system to fix them for good and gain the skills to improve and continuously evolve as a poker player. You'll study more effectively, overcome leaks and tendencies that felt impossible to break, and rebuild trust and confidence in your game, finally seeing your hard work pay off as you move up the stakes. So if you're ready to stop guessing and start improving with clarity, break through the patterns that have been holding you back, and take your game to the next level, join the Mechanics Leakbuster program using the link down below.
Rene, for you also went through the same period online. Did you ever feel the pull or the urge to go to live?
Not really. I like the comfort and kind of the control of, online poker. Live is a bit more chaotic, I would say, right? In terms of when the games run and, if you can play, you show up. It's no, I prefer the online grind. I'm curious, you mentioned about the bigger goals. What did actually impact a lot before the peak of my career? Wasn't it setting a bigger goal? For years, I would have just gone by clicking, kind of what Seth also said, right? Just being comfortable. But it was when actually I had influence, right? I started an office with some other guys, and one of the guys was like, okay, we're going to try to become the best poker players. We're going to crush online cash games. And I was like, okay, well, I guess so, right? I never really thought about a higher goal. And that then turned into certain actions that you started to take, right? Because you now set it a higher goal. It's like, okay, well, what should I then do if this is actually my goal? Did you have something similar happen to you, Seth, where you're like, oh, wait, so I now actually have a higher goal. I guess I should now do this or do that. I should take more serious. Maybe I should now, rent a coach because this is not my goal. Did you notice that setting a higher goal set certain actions in motion?
Yeah, what you said there about having your friends, now it's now you have accountability with your friends now. And I think that is a crucial thing. And I tell this to everybody who asks me what's your best poker advice for climbing the stakes or becoming more successful? And it's get yourself in a circle of people similarly minded and willing to work hard like you are. And that's what Jason was for me, right? Because as soon as you have this accountability, okay, we are going to go do this. We're going to go crush, it's such a motivator. And I mean, in all senses of what it takes to be better, right? Motivation, goal setting, results, work ethic. It's having your guys who are out there in the trenches with you doing the hard work to get better. That's just the ultimate cheat code, right? So that's what Jason was for me. And there are some other guys I would include in that kind of group. We have another friend, Nick Ramponi. If anybody knows who he is, probably a few people do, but he was, so Nick Ramponi was my longtime roommate and very close friend. He was also Jason Koon's first poker mentor. He was one of the top dogs at Heads Up Sit and Goes back in 2010, 2009. He has since, made a bunch of money and retired. He's been retired from poker for years and years, but this was kind of our core group. And it was the same thing for us, right? It was just we want to do as well as we can. Let's all bring each other up. It's the rising tide that lifts all boats, and you can't really manufacture that if you're a lone wolf. So yeah, the team, the group, that's the key to it.
So Jason Koon became kind of the guy shouting at you, you had the swim coach back then, and now it was Jason Koon shouting at you. What's he obviously is a big influence, has had a big influence on you. what is like some of the most important things you learned from him?
So the thing about Jason is like Jason has a very how would I describe it? Like he's so unique in a way, like how would I describe it? Like one, it's simply just like work ethic is just insane. Like I was saying before, just absolutely refuses to be outworked by anybody. Like unbelievable off the charts work ethic, as well as the talent to go with it. So the biggest thing about Jason is that like, and he's very infectious, you know, like he brings up everyone around him in a positive way. You know, he's not the guy screaming at you, you know, like I had the screaming at you coaches in the past. So he was never a guy who was going to do that. Like he was always cool. He would call you on your bullshit though. Like if you were like, you know, if you were like acting like a shithead, he would say something. Yeah, the biggest thing about Jason was always just like the infectiousness of like his drive to succeed. And it's like, it's incredible to be around because it just absolutely lifts up everybody around him. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm just crazy grateful to have been so close with him all these years, because it's like, if you spend a lot of time around the guy, you just can't help but be successful. It's crazy. It's just like, it's so infectious. So he's truly one of a kind. And I've never met anybody quite like him.
You mentioned one of your reasons for transitioning kind of out of online poker because you saw it was slowly dying. Transitioning from online to live, what were like the key changes you had to make, and how are the two environments different?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say about online versus live is like, I love online poker and I miss it so much. And it makes me really sad, especially now that like online poker or tournaments in 2025 seems to be like a pretty good way to make money. And I think guys are doing very, very well out there. And that makes me really sad because I'm American. I like living in the United States, and that's not an option for me. Cause I would love to just, you know, like you're saying, wake up, play a session in my boxers and be in the comfort of my own house with my own food and all this, rather than, traveling around to, you know, 10 time zones over to go play high stakes tournaments for 2 weeks and not sleep well. But like, I'm not complaining here because like the high stakes tournament scene is awesome. It's a very cool thing. And I've got to experience so many amazing things that like I probably don't deserve to, but it's been cool. But after all these years, I do get very envious of guys who get to play from the comfort of their own home. But as far as like how it was transition wise, you know, it took a very, very long time for me to kind of understand live poker. And what I mean by that is like for the first couple years of my high roller career, I was one of these guys where I tried to just be as technically sound as I could. You know, like I was constantly doing all the solver work, just trying to play as optimal as I could, as unexploitable as I could. And it took me years to realize that like virtually everybody's pretty good at that. And like it's certainly not perfect. And if you put a perfect, you know, equilibrium bot in a tournament, I'm sure it does great and wins a lot. But like I said at the start of the show, like the more and more tournaments I play, even with the best players in the world, the most disciplined players in the world, it's very human. And all the guys that are the best and have had the most success and continue to have the most success, they're the guys that are awesome at the soft skills, you know, the guys that are awesome at, like we talked about, recognize when people are on winner's tilt, when they're tired, when just what they're up to, you know, just all the great exploiters are the ones who are the real studs. And I think, well, that also is true of online poker, just because you know who you're playing against. There are other soft skills involved with live poker that are developed in the same manner, you know, whether it's picking up live tells or just managing yourself in a live poker setting for 2 straight weeks of playing high rollers. So it took me a really long time to get to the point where I thought I was a very good live poker player. I thought I was, I've had a lot of confidence in my technical ability at poker for a very long time, but I would say it took me till at least after COVID to feel like I was like, okay, I'm getting the best of people because of my live poker skills.
So do you think it does have did have some benefits, the fact that you had this online background, and also if you look maybe at nowadays, guys who come from online to live, they probably kind of suck, right, in this soft skill area. But do you, in which way do you think the online guys do have some sort of an edge or advantage? What kind of advantage does online poker give you?
Well, yeah. So the online, the kind of necessity, I would call it, of being a truly great player is just having millions and millions of hands, right? So online, you can't do that in live poker, and online poker, obviously you can do that. But I wouldn't call it an edge, because every single great live player at this point had an online background, right? Like all of us came up online, like think of everybody: Jason Koon, Mikita Badziakuski, Stevie Chidwick, Tim Adams, Nick Petrangelo, Daniel DeVoris, Ike Haxton, Ben Tollerene, like Alex Ponikovs, every single high stakes MTT player you can mention, like we all started as online players. So like there's no edge for guys like they're not going to out hand us, cause like I have a poker tracker database of like 7 million tournament hands, so like virtually nobody, even though I haven't played online full time lately, is like going to have more hands. So yeah, it's a very important part of your development as a player, but I wouldn't call it an advantage just because we've all done that. We all came up that way,
What I do notice if I see you play is that you have great composure and focus at the table. That's obviously also part of like the soft skills. How do you develop this?
Yeah, so that's I would say I'll get a little personal here, but on top of the athletic background, like that's obviously huge, staying composed. And I do feel like composure is one of my strongest attributes as a poker player. And I would say, I'll share this, but like when I was a kid in my family, I had 2 older brothers, and one of my brothers he was kind of the guy who like started shit in our house, like he would go at it with our parents a lot. He was a guy who had a very big problem with authority. And so I was kind of the youngest and didn't necessarily understand what was going on. But like I grew up in a environment where like I was playing witness to like a lot of very intense arguments and fights, both within my family and within like, say, my brother and his coaches that I would witness or whatever like this. So I was always kind of forced to be this figure, not forced to, but just kind of fell into this role in our family where I was just kind of like the steady kid. You know what I mean? Like I was always the one who was like kind of there to hold my mom's hand after she had an argument with my brother. And what it developed in me was this, I was able to, well, not able to, but I was in these states of like very intense, like, God, I really want to do something. This is very stressful. I really, really hate this, but I have to kind of be this calm presence. And not that I like consciously knew this, we're talking when I was like 12, 13, 14 years old. I didn't necessarily consciously think this, but it was always just very clear to me that my mom needed like some kind of rock after this happened. Like after these fights were happening, like she needed someone to just be there that she could like just sit there quietly with and not be fighting with. So those moments in my childhood and adolescence like really kind of forged this like kind of calm under this very stressful situation attitude. And I really think that shaped me a lot. And like, as you can probably tell, like it helps me stay composed in like high pressure situations.
I can imagine, is there then at some point, so when that high pressure situation is over, do you have then an outlet for it? Because you kind of keep it in you. What do you do and then do to let it out after? Like, because I assume it does take a toll on you, right? At some point it becomes too much. So you have to kind of reset or detox.
Yeah. And I was never a guy who really just like outburst with it eventually. Like, again, part of being somebody who can handle pressure in a calm way is being able to swallow a lot of stress and a lot of pain. So I was always able to do that. But fortunately for me, it was just like, it comes back to just movement in sports, like regardless of what you have stuck in your throat, like if you go run or go play basketball or something, like you're going to forget about it. So that's how I got through that and was able to not just collapse under the stress of these situations. And yeah, obviously release it in the same way today. You know, like I was saying, every single Triton, try to play tennis or run or work out every day. And it just always does the trick. It's just the best medicine.
One thing that stands out to me in your career is that you've always been an early adapter, or at least that's how it seems. You started poker early, jumped into new formats. I saw, for example, in Hand 'em Up as well, that you play short stack, PLO. So it seems like, whatever people want to play, you'll learn it and play it as well. Same actually true for the live high roller scene when it started off. What made you see the opportunity in these bigger events that started to pop up?
Yeah, so I'd like to consider myself somewhat of an opportunist, especially in poker, because you just never know. Like, poker is so fragile in a sense. Like, well, it's fragile. Like the high stakes community is fragile for sure. Like if the Triton guys, like Mr. Paul, Mr. Richard, if they decide they didn't want to play poker anymore, Triton just disappears. Like, it's that simple. So the high stakes scene is very fragile, but the scene as a whole, I wouldn't say it is. Like the WSOP and like WPT, like there's always going to be a living to be made there, whether it's, you're taking a big pay cut, obviously. But yeah, I was always a guy who just wanted to make the most out of this thing. Right. And for tournaments, it was always, there's a very clear ceiling. It's get to the high roller tour and be a winner on that tour. That's the best way to make the most money. So for me, it was simply like have the circle around me to, provide the tools, provide the support, provide the group think to get to that point. And along the way, I was consistently, urged along by guys like Jason and Nick and all these other friends I developed. So it was always just, trying to climb the ladder as well as I could, as long as I thought my talent could take me. And, here we are.
How was that transition going from like, I guess, larger field MTTs, right? Kind of I'm picturing like main events to like smaller high rollers. How was the transition and what were some of the adjustments that you had to make in your game?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the biggest adjustment, and again, this was something that took time to get better at, and it's kind of what almost every new player into high rollers struggles with, because when you play mid stakes, big fields, like the only real skill you need to have to win is just being willing to bluff, like you just need to be willing to bulldoze people, because that's what wins at mid stakes, like you can just constantly bulldoze people over with just front door, kind of simple, like direct aggression over and over and over and over again. And that's kind of all you need to win. Obviously, the more nuanced you are, the better. But like, if you just rampage a bunch of bluffs, like to the, obviously to a point, you have to have some kind of control and be something of a poker player. But to win at mid stakes and in big fields, it's just all about aggression and blowing people off hands. Whereas once you get to high stakes, it's like, okay, I just ran a massive bluff on a guy in the bubble of a 300K and he called me with like fourth pair king kicker. So it's like, oh shit, that's not going to work so well. So once you get up to that level, the game becomes far more complex, because you have to play well on all the passive lines, because, at its core, when poker is played at a very high level, it's a defensive game. It's a very defensive game, because virtually every decision in an entire poker hand, you're being laid a very good price. Like just think about the most common hands in Hold'em. It's like somebody opens, you're in the big blind, you're getting 4-1 to defend. Okay. The defensive part is you're going to defend mostly by calling. Okay. You call defend 70% hands or whatever. Check. You face a quarter pot c-bet. Now you're being laid 5-1 to continue. So like it's all about defending, because most of your decisions are going to be defensive. And take that same situation at mid stakes. It's like, okay, I'm just going to check raise this quarter pot c-bet with like almost anything, because they're going to under defend. I'm going to barrel the turn on all these cards because they're going to under defend. Then I'm going to go all in on all these cards because they're going to under defend. Whereas in high stakes, that obviously doesn't work. So it starts to being like, okay, these are my calls. How am I going to defend on turn barrels? Like, what turns am I leading, and how am I going to defend versus raises on leads? So the game tree just gets a lot bigger, a lot faster, because at high stakes, at a higher level, poker is much more defensive and just much harder. Honestly, it's a lot harder to play well defensively than it is to just. It's pretty easy to just be like, okay, I'm betting, I'm barreling. These are my value hands. This is how many bluffs I need. Like, that's a relatively easy equation to solve, but it's a lot harder to be like, okay, I need to defend, 70% of my range versus his bet size. I need to defend by raising sometimes. I need some slow plays. I need some like bluff check raises and stuff. That's a much more difficult equation than just like, I'm bluffing, like, let's try to be balanced.
What was the process look like for you? What things did you started to actively do more to try to kind of go from that trick, right, of being just over aggressive on mid stakes? How did that process look like in terms of things that you started doing to improve your game?
So a lot of spreadsheet work, a lot of like, okay, I'm here on the turn after check calling that quarter pot C bet on the flop. I'm facing a turn pot size bet. Taking a ton of different boards and seeing like, okay, how much second pair continues? What type of second pair continues? Okay, which draws fold, which draws raise. So it's like a lot of, a friend of mine has a great term for this. He calls it reading the manual, basically like getting into solvers and treating them as a manual for how to play poker and saying like, okay, top pair does this, like whatever, flush draws do this. And then, so do that work for sure. And then just supplement it with like solver reps until your eyes bleed. You know what I mean? Like playing GTO trainers until your eyes bleed. And that's how you really get great at poker, I think, is because with these defensive, not only defensive, but also aggressive, like it's the most important thing is like thresholds, right? Like you want to be continuing hands that have enough equity or enough playability to continue. And the best way to do that is just play thousands and thousands of solver reps in that same spot. So that's always kind of what got it done for me. And I think what I'm sure most people do to, really get the defensive lines hammered into them.
Yeah, you were actually, you started playing poker like similar time as me. We both came from pre-solver. You were an early adapter, like I said, in some of this other area. Were you also an early adapter when it came down to solvers?
Yeah. Probably not one of the first guys. I think PO came out in 2013, I want to say. And the first time I really started doing a lot of PO work was probably like 2015. I always hear Stevie Chidwick. He talks about very early on, like the first year of PO Solver being out. There's a Skype group with the dev. His name's Piotr. Named it after himself. It's cool. But where like there was probably 30 to 100 people in this group, and Stevie was like, you'd be like, hey, how about this feature? And he would just develop it in like a day, and it would just be in the solver the next day or whatever. So I'm really sad that I missed out on those days. I was a little late to the party because 2013 was the year I was drinking on the beach all the time. So, but yeah, I was still relatively early, and fortunately for me, like once I did kind of start doing the solver work, like I'm the type of guy who's built for the solver work. Like I fit in much better in like the solver era of poker than the pre-solver era, where it was, the very creative thinkers, the very great exploiters were the guys who were the best back then. Whereas me, I do a little bit better in a structured learning format. But like I said, in the last, number of years, I've discovered that the structured part's kind of the easy part. It's necessary and it's not easy to get to that point, but it's like, it's very doable. And that's why there's so many guys who have done it. Like there's far more, probably hundreds of guys out there who can play technically at least close to the point where the top 50 guys can, but that's not the whole equation. So, fortunately for me, I was always a guy who really enjoyed doing that work and enjoyed, making the spreadsheets, doing the solver reps. So that got me to be pretty bulletproof relatively quickly. Well, not quickly, but I got there.
So a lot of playing against the solver was part of your advice. I'm sure when you play, you're not just following the manual, right? As your friend called it. How have you been able to translate or extract like the theoretical solver knowledge into practical play? Like how have you been able to translate that, because there's plenty of players, that try to copy the solver, and we all know what happens there.
Yeah, so I think a big mistake that people make that try to be overly technical, and I did this too, is early in my career, is like just understanding exactly what a solver is and like how the outputs come about. And like the most clear description of like what I'm saying here is like, if you get to a river spot in a solver and you like, say you play this hand out live and you like cross check it in a solver to see like if you made a good bluff catch on the river, right? It's like you have to backtrack through the turn play and the flop play and the pre-flop play to be like, okay, this is all the things that had to happen to get to these ranges in this river spot in the solver. Like, did this happen? You know what I mean? Like, am I counting on this guy to like barrel pocket deuces on this like ace, queen, jack, 7 board or whatever? Like, is he doing that every time? And if the answer is no, then it's like, okay, the output you're looking at is basically worthless. And your actual useful conclusion to draw from that is like, okay, I don't think this guy had enough bluffs to this point. So like, I think this is a bad bluff catch, where it's like, okay, you just look in the solver and be like, oh, it's a 0 EV bluff catcher. Like, I did fine. But like, that's not what that's not how you use a solver as a tool to actually become a better poker player. You know what I mean? It's like the closer you are to the root in the game tree, the closer you want to play to the solver, right? Like, obviously pre-flop, say you're playing a 6-max game in the low jack, like you look at a solver output for what your opening range should be. Like, you should generally just do that. You know what I mean? And then you get to a flop because your opponent who's good is probably going to be defending the big blind reasonably well. Like, you look at how you should see bet. Yeah, you should probably just do that. Or like, maybe if it's a board where they should be leading 40% of their range, but you don't think they are, you probably shouldn't be playing the way the solver's playing, right? You should probably play more passive because they're going to have more nutted hands. So using a solver as a tool to get better rather than a strategy to just directly replicate, I think that's where a lot of people make mistakes, and a lot, especially young, newer players, where they play this hand and get to the river, like I was saying, and be like, oh, this bluff was good. It was a 0 EV bluff. It was like, I don't think you're necessarily like using the solver properly, because like it's maybe a complex river node where all that stuff didn't happen the way it was supposed to happen to get where you are, right? So yeah, being efficient with like your use of solvers and what they actually are is like the most valuable skill.
It's kind of reminds me also what you said about the coaching that you got from Chris Kirk, right? That poker is more of a fundament. You start with a fundament and you put tricks on top of that. You had like the tricks, right, that you kind of have to adjust it from when you started to play these high rollers. Then where do you layer the exploits on top of that, right? And what kind of exploits are we talking about? Live reads, adjustments to current metas. We already talked about, knowing if players are more fatigued, winning, losing, and how that affects things.
Yeah, so I think the first layer of your kind of exploits comes from your solver work. Like I was saying, like studying a spot where you're like, okay, I think this is a spot where people are going to bluff too much, because I'm looking at the solver, I'm looking at all these give up. It's like, oh, look at this. Solver gives up with 5 high, 6 high, all these times. Whereas I feel like every time I'm in a pot with a person, if they have 6 high on the river, they're going to bluff. But like, if you're like, okay, that's the first thing you see in the solver, right? Or vice versa. It's like, okay, they don't have all these bluffs, so I think I'll have a very profitable or good hand to fold. So that's kind of like layer one. Layer two, I would say, is just really paying attention to all the kind of particular lines, particularly high frequency lines. And this is just each player you're sitting with. Obviously, if you watch streams, you get a little extra information. But there's often final table dynamics, so you have to be careful there. But like, maybe it's like, okay, this is a player who, when like in a single raise pot versus the big blind, after check, small bet, call, and the second card pairs, they just lead 100% of the time, which is like, I mean, a very short stack, it can be okay. But if you're any 50 big blinds deep or whatever, like that's someone that you can very easily exploit, right? Because the range is too weak. Like, yes, they're supposed to have a lot of leads, but like if they lead everything all the time, that's a big problem for them. So that's kind of like the layer two of just really paying attention to, because you play a lot of hands with everybody in these high stakes fields. It's a pretty small player pool. And now you have things like the Triton app. So it's, same as online players, just review specific players' hand histories. And then, yeah, you get to the higher level of like, okay, what's going on today? Is this guy tired? Did he win a tournament last night? Am I tired? How am I feeling? So that's kind of just how the exploit soft skill layer cake kind of stacks up.
You started the high rollers basically straight away when they kind of became popular. You're still playing them today. How do you think the meta has changed like over the years, and how would you describe kind of the current meta?
Yeah, it's really interesting right now, honestly, because this is always the case. You kind of have online players, whether they're young or not. They're usually on the young side, but they kind of pop in and out of the high stakes, whether they're a part of a stable or maybe taking a shot or selling action at some high stakes. And the interesting thing right now is that online plays very differently than live. Online tournaments are much, much more aggressive than live high stakes are. Like I was saying, high stakes MTTs are much more properly defensive, whereas online it's like a huge battle fest, I feel like. So it's kind of interesting because you get these like guys that, pop out of online and come in to play like a Triton 100K, and they're just like completely out of their minds, like trying to play a gigantic pot every single time. So it is interesting. And it's another big skill to kind of, not treat the population as one population, because, you have very different groups of guys, whether it's just like geographical kind of information bubbles. Like for us, you kind of have like the North American guys, the Americans and Canadians who everybody knows we're friends and stuff. We kind of all talk poker, where then you have like the Spain, Portugal crew, you have like the Russian crew. You have like these kind of bubbles, but not only that, you have, a variety of different guys, whether they're in these bubbles or not, coming up, taking a shot from playing online poker. So you have a bit of a scattered kind of, what could I like strategy base, I guess you would call it. So, it's very fun to kind of try to stitch that all together in a tapestry whenever you're playing, because it's very different, and seeing like trying to, kind of predict how people are going to respond to each other. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting kind of dynamic player pool right now.
You mentioned earlier that you really like the high roller scene, and obviously us from the outside, we can only look in from the outside. Many players say things and have opinions about this. I'm sure there's many myths floating around of what people say goes on, but we don't know what really goes on. Can you maybe share some lights what it's like in the high roller scene, and maybe some myths that you hear people talk about that scene that actually not completely true? Anything that stands out?
The biggest myth. Yeah, I mean, the biggest myth that like drives me crazy that you see like online and stuff is like, and again, I know that like how the internet works is like generally the most annoying. I'm talking about like Twitter particularly. Like generally the most annoying people are the ones commenting on everything. So like you get these very annoying, just like Twitter people who are like, oh, this is stupid. All these guys have 3% of themselves. And it's just like complete nonsense. Like of all the people that I know who have been playing high stakes for say 6, 7, 8 years, like everybody has big pieces of themselves. I mean, some guys have more than 100% risk in these tournaments because they have themselves, they have a bunch of pieces they've bought of other people. So like, the myth that like everyone's playing for a tiny percentage of themselves and just getting markup is nonsense. There are definitely those guys in the tournament, like especially the young guys I talked about, and like I'm not at all like talking shit about them, because like you're talking about somebody who can sell at markup for 100K tournament. Like that's awesome. Like that person's an awesome poker player. So like people that bash those guys, it's like look at yourself in the mirror. Like I bet you'd sell your soul to be able to do that, So just some like Joe Blow on Twitter is like, oh, this guy's a loser. He's only got 5% of himself. One, you're probably not right. And two, like even if there are people in the field that can do that, like that's awesome. They're incredible poker players. They can sell a markup to the toughest tournament in the world. Like it's just it's a very tilting thing for people to like. And I mean, what it is, it's natural, right? Like people who are envious of other people's success and wish they could be in that situation, they do whatever they can to cut them down because that makes them feel better. But it does make me sad that unfortunately the loudest, most annoying, most bitter people do shape public opinion in to some degree, because they're the ones posting things. They're the ones that people read. So yeah, that's really annoying to me. And kind of in the same vein, I responded to this thing. Daniel Negreanu like said something on his podcast this summer where he was like, okay, you look at the yearly money list, and all these guys have like, 10, 11, 12 million in cashes. Everybody's in for 12 million in buy-ins, so everybody's losing. And it's just like, dude, what are you talking about? Like where's the money going? It's the economy. If there's losers, there have to be winners, right? So like we're not paying 50% rake. It's not like all the money's going to the rake. So like he was claiming that everybody was in for 12 million in buy-ins every year, whereas my biggest year ever has been 7.3 million in buy-ins. So full 5 million less. And so yeah, he was kind of spreading this idea that nobody's winning and it's all just an ego battle. And that's just complete nonsense. Obviously, like how could it possibly work that way? Like where's the money going if everybody's losing?
Obviously, there's a lot of publicity around these events. How much pressure, I guess, do these lights, camera, media coverage add to these events?
So the biggest thing about the big events and pressure as far as the media goes is mostly the stream. Like you're playing a very large amount of hands on stream where thousands of people are watching. So some people might, be a little bit more stressed out because it kind of goes back to that chasing perfection that we were talking about, where they feel like any little mistake they might make on stream is just going to get crucified by everybody. Because, that's how people respond. You watch a professional sports game, whether it's like some guy on the couch is like, oh, look at this dumbass, can't even run whatever. It's the same thing in poker. It's like, oh, look at this idiot, this guy who plays like some 1-2 game somewhere is criticizing all the best players in the world. But I wouldn't say that bothers me so much. And at this point it's pretty comfortable. I'm pretty fine with both playing on stream and just having everything covered. But it is a lot early on. It feels like in those first couple years or the first few times you play on stream or whatever, it's very, it's overwhelming in a sense where you feel like you can't relax. Like I'll tell you a story. The first 100K I ever played, I can't remember if this was 2017 or 18, but it was Poker Masters 100K in Vegas. This was back when, you'd still get pretty big 100Ks in Vegas, and I made the final table, and I think there's 6 left. So it's whatever. We're huge stakes playing on stream, final table. And I play this hand where these are going to be some old school German names. Stefan Sontheimer opens the cutoff. I 3-bet the button with pocket kings. And somehow, some way, remember, this is my first time playing a big final table on stream. Somehow, some way, Christian Christner, another German who doesn't play anymore, cold 4-bets the big blind. But I somehow miss it. Like I just don't even realize it happens. And I think it's back on Stefan. So I'm looking at Stefan. He's over to my right. And I'm just paying attention to him because he takes a second and then he folds and I just muck. So I have kings and this is at the final table, 6-handed. So I just muck kings to this like cold 4-bet off like 40 big blinds. And I'm just like, the dealer kind of looks at me and like, I'm just kind of like a deer in headlights, like this big light, like lights everywhere, like big stream final table. Like first time I'd played big, I'd sold a ton of action, obviously. And I was just like, what the fuck? Like, what do I do now? And yeah, it just kind of got the best of me. The scene kind of overwhelmed me. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about, where like dealing with some kind of adversity in that way, like you come out more resilient on the other side, right? It's like I experienced that. I know what it was like and I made it through. So, but yeah, those first years, like it can get the best of you for sure.
Yeah, I've definitely been guilty that I would watch a stream and I see a hand. I'm like, what are you doing? And then I was like, well, I'm just sitting here. I'm pretty well rested. Maybe this guy, like you said, is already down to 2 million. Day 8 hasn't slept in days. Nowadays, like, and also when I see people criticize him, I have way more empathy when I see plays and just like the performance aspect specifically of live poker. I would say, like, I play online cash games. Online cash games, you're in a controlled environment. You can prepare. You you can pretty consistently play your A game. You don't have to make mistakes because you haven't slept for days. Because if you haven't slept for days, you're doing something wrong.
You can also get up and take an hour break if you want. That's one of the hard parts about tournaments. Exactly. Is you're stuck. You're there until you're out. You know, if it takes 12 hours, you're there.
Yeah, it's like, the life is like Battle of the C games, whereas online cash is like Battle of the A games. That's actually always what I liked about cash games, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist and I like to play well. I don't like to play C game. It's not really fulfilling for me, but I can see, especially in the live environment, how that's different. I'm curious, like, how did you reset after that moment? Like, you fold kings, you're like, what the fuck just happened? But, they're not going to be like, oh, guys, Seth is having a hard time. Let's take a 10-minute break for him to reset. No, that's not how it works. So what did you do? You dealt cards straight away, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's exactly what happened. So on my direct left was Fedor, and this was Fedor in like peak Fedor heater. He had just like gone on that crazy heater where he won like 15 million or something. But so the very next hand, I get King Jack suited in the cutoff, and I open, and he's on the button, and he 3-bets, and like he ends up having like Jack 7 suited, like some pretty dusty 3-bets. So he was like trying to take advantage of that. And I remember very specifically, it was like when it got on me to open, I was like, okay, I'm going to take 29 seconds and I'm going to open. Then I open, and he 3-bets. And then it gets back to me. It's like, okay, I know I'm calling. I'm going to take 29 seconds. So I'm going to call. I'm going to absolutely maximize my time to just chill out, just breathe, and whatever. And fortunately for me, like the hand played out where like it comes Jack high. So like we both flop top pair. He like C-bets once, and the pot plays out pretty small, and I win. So like fortunately for me, I didn't have to face like a triple or something. But yeah, it was just immediately like, okay, I am forced to calm down right now because I have to play this hand. I have to play a 3-bet pot versus like one of the toughest players in the world. And yeah, it was like, all right, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to breathe. And we got through it, fortunately.
It's great that you then kind of win that hand straight away back to back, right? I think it's a great recovery. Like sometimes when I feel like, okay, sometimes when you're like, okay, it got too much. I have one hand here, one hand, and then it's like, okay, things are not going my way. And then I need something to work for me. I need like a bluff to go through. I need a bluff catch to work. Yep. I just need something to turn it around. So, but must be great that you straight away win that hand after. Like you said, if you would straight away lose it or something, it can be a slippery hill, slippery down. I don't know what the expression is. But
slippery slope.
I mean. Slippery slope. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. And I mean, that's hard. It's hard to. Because it does not, like some of the times, like that very next hand, like maybe he rivers a 7 and gets like a big bat out of me on the river. So like my situation's just gotten even worse. So yeah, it's you gotta take your wins and get yourself back on the rails.
Would you then, obviously, like you sort of can't really sit out like you would sit out in a cash game? Would you or have you ever in those situations just stood up and went for a walk and just don't care that you don't see the next 5 hands?
No, I wouldn't say I've ever intentionally missed hands at tournaments. The only time I've intentionally missed hands was because I had to go pee. Like, couldn't handle it, and like that's just got to do it. So yeah, never just like gotten up and walked away. Like I was saying, like one of my strengths has always kind of been my ability to kind of stay calm through stressful situations. So I've always kind of leaned on that. And yeah, I don't think it was ever anything completely unmanageable.
So going on 50 buy-in downswing, right, is pretty normal. And again, I think we talked earlier, right, rationally, it's the same if you play 1Ks, 25Ks, or even 100Ks. But in practice, how is it different to go on a 50 buy-in downswing in a 50K or 100K compared to a 5K?
Yeah, so when you go on a downswing like that, the hole just feels so much deeper, whether it's like, I guess when you go on a downswing and you play mid stakes, the majority of the tournaments you play are going to be big fields. So like literally in any tournament, not literally, but like for the most part, any single tournament you register, you can like get out of your hole, right? So like say you play 1Ks and you go on 100 buy-in downswing and you're down 100K. Like if you play almost all the 1Ks you play, not all, but most of them, like if you top 3 it, you're probably going to cash for 200K and you're just going to be out. Whereas like when we're playing high stakes, the stakes vary so much where a lot of the time, you might be in a $2 million hole, but the 25K you're playing that day is 370K to win. So that's probably the most intense part of it, is that, you know, like it's going to take a lot of work, and it's harder for you to just like have one way out with like one big tournament. Obviously those tournaments do come around, and it's been cool for me to win a couple of them this year. And but yeah, if you are in a Triton for 1.5 million, and then you're playing that last tournament, it's 300K to win. It's a pretty bleak situation, but it's part of the job. You know, you gotta keep your shit together on that tournament.
You don't only play a no limit hold'em, because I saw in your hand up as well cashes in PLO, short deck. Which skills did you notice transition over nicely, and which did you quickly have to sort of unlearn to become successful at some of these other formats?
I'll talk about PLO. PLO is something that's more recent to me, and it's a very cool game. I really like PLO. Honestly, I wish I was a PLO pro from the start rather than a hold'em. I think it's a better poker game. And the thing that is different about PLO is, like, hold'em in a sense is kind of like a computery game. I would say it's more about, well, PLO, like theoretically this is true about PLO too, but hold'em at a high level is very like kind of frequency based. It's very like defense based, and kind of making sure you're not like overly exploitable in every spot. And you kind of do a lot of randomizing and mixed strategies to accomplish this. Whereas PLO, having 2 extra cards, you have so much more information. The information is more perfect in a sense of like what you're supposed to do as far as like solver optimal play happens, at least. So there's basically no mixed strategies in PLO. There are, but it's basically just like monotone boards and paired boards. So in the vast majority of your decisions in PLO, you're not going to do any randomizing. You're not going to play any mixed strategies. So it's very, very fun to kind of piece together what your side cards do to your strategy. And yeah, and that's something that's very different than No Limit, and was kind of a tough transition for me at first, because like it's very natural in No Limit to, like, the hands where you have pure strategies, at least on flops or pre-flop, they're going to be kind of few and far between, right? Like you're doing lots and lots of mixing. Like most of the time you're going to have some kind of mixed hand, whereas PLO, it's the exact opposite. Like almost always you're going to have no mix. So my thought process was very regimented in a way that was built for mixed strategies, whereas PLO, that's not happening anymore. So it's like kind of like a gear grinding, where it's like, all right, you take this big part of your thought process and completely throw it away. So it's like, okay, here we go. Let's, pay attention to this other thing that is completely different than this other poker game. So that's been like a really fun challenge with PLO. And it's why I love that game so much.
So it sounds like it's a bit like you play hold'em with your buddy, but every time he folds, he shows you his whole cards. And based on that, you make your decisions.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, interesting. I never really looked at it this
Or
way.
maybe, no,
Yeah.
this was actually a cool discussion we had on Twitter with some people, where it was like, let's play hold'em, but because the first iteration was like, let's play hold'em, but at the very start of the hand, you just flip over 3 dead cards. So every single hand, there's just 3 dead cards that people know. And then like another variation that I really liked that people came up with was, every person gets their own dead card face down before the cards get dealt. So everyone knows one single dead card, but it's a secret. And it's kind of like Pineapple, but it's not the same, because in Pineapple, you always discard the worst cards. So like all the discards are just going to heavily be deuces, 3s, and 4s or whatever. Whereas in this made up version, it's like, okay, now like there's discarded ace of spades. So, nobody has a nut flush. So like it would be very fun. But yeah, it's kind of like what PLO is naturally, is like, it's this element of kind of makes it harder to solve, makes things less clear, more muddy, obviously, and just makes the best poker players kind of stand out.
So PLO confirmed, greater game than No Limit hold'em. Short deck, worst game?
Well, short deck, I didn't enjoy it as much, but part of that is because I don't think I was ever really, really good at it. I was good enough to win. And like the thing about these tournaments we've played, in whether it was Triton or there was a series where, or there was a period of time where we played a lot online, and I won a lot in the online short deck games, but I've done like well in Triton too. But like short deck was a game where there was only like a couple people that actually really got great at it because we just didn't have the volume to put in. I mean, I played a fair bit of 501k online, but like those games didn't run that much, and they just weren't that great. So I have a complex relationship with short deck, I would say. Like I've enjoyed it, and I like the feeling of like I felt like I was good enough and creating edge for myself, but I also really hated the feeling of being like, okay, there's so many spots where I'm very uncomfortable with what I'm supposed to do. Like with No Limit, in virtually every spot, like I have some sense of confidence that I have a good idea of what I'm supposed to do. Like maybe like I'm just virtually never totally lost in a No Limit Hold'em hand, but there would be short deck hands where it'd be like, God, I don't know. Like I really don't know what to do here. And that part is like very, very, very tough. And I have the same problem with PLO nowadays too, right? Like I've only been playing PLO seriously for a year and a half or something now. And yeah, there's plenty of situations like that.
I know you're friends with Ben. Did he give you any good PLO tips? I'm sure he's a great guy to have in your corner.
I didn't hear the name. I was coughing. What name?
I said, I know you have Ben Tollerene as a friend in your corner. That must be a great guy to give you a little bit of PLO feedback. Any things you can share with our audience? Maybe a little tip that he gave you was like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So Ben is, in my opinion, like probably the most talented poker player of all time. And like truly, like definitely on the Mount Rushmore. Like he's a guy where I'm so glad that he's playing both No Limit and PLO tournaments right now, because like watching the guy operate is like, it's like watching, a virtuoso or whatever play their instrument. Like it's really incredible to watch him operate, especially when you can hear him talk about the hands afterwards. It's like, you watch this guy play and you're just like, wow, this guy is so powerful. It's a very kind of, there are very few guys who have given me that feeling of being like, wow. And he's one of the guys. And obviously with PLO, it's his bread and butter. And when I'm watching him play PLO, I'm just like trying to keep up as well as I can with what's going on. And then like getting to talk to him about it afterwards. It's a treat too, especially because people probably don't get this at all because he's a very kind of quiet guy, but Ben's hilarious. He's a very, very funny guy, especially with the way he talks about poker. Like he talks about poker differently than, well, not differently, but like he just always has like some funny like one-liner about like he'll name a certain bet, a certain like funny thing or something, and he'll just come out of nowhere with it, and it's so goddamn funny. So like, yeah, like watching him operate and just being kind of like in awe in a sense, and then also getting to hear the like hilarious little like banter from him. It's really great.
Seems a great mix of value, education and humor. That's for sure. That's the thing you want to hear. You play PLO, you play No Limit Hold'em in the same format, tournaments. What key fundamentals continue to apply that are vital to being a good tournament player, regardless of the game that you're playing?
Yeah, so that's a good question, especially on this PLO talk, because PLO and short deck, they're games with very dynamic equities, right? Like Hold'em, the equities are pretty static and they run pretty far apart. Whereas when you're playing PLO or short deck, we have dynamic equities running really close together. So when that happens, it becomes very important to understand, at least to a solid degree, how like nonlinear chip values in tournament works and how bubbles are supposed to work and when you're supposed to be aggressive and when you're not supposed to be aggressive. So like I mentioned before, like there was a time period where I played a ton of online short deck tournaments, and through this period of time, I got to learn very well like how short deck ICM works, at least to some degree. Like you play enough you get a bunch of reps at it. So that really applies to PLO as well, where it's like, okay, we're in high pressure situations on a bubble or whatever, and you kind of throw conventional pot odds and hand equities out the window, and you have to be dynamic with it. So that will always be the kind of key skill as a tournament player, regardless of what game you're playing. And that's very cool to me because it's extremely difficult to solve. And the models that solvers spit out are very rough models. They're not a very good model of the actual situation that's happening, usually just because it's only one hand. And, ICM models work as if the tournament just ends right after the hand and everyone gets paid out their EV. So that's obviously not what happens at all. So it's a very rough model of the situation. So again, people who are, it just comes down to the people who have great soft skills, great poker skills. They're just good poker players and they understand how tournament dynamics work. And yeah, that's the beauty of tournaments is they are so far from solvable that they will always be good. And as long as people don't have chips in their head, but I guess even if people have chips in their head, it's still like so hard to solve. You can't just like solve it right away. So, but yeah, it's very fun because tournaments are gonna be good for a long time.
Coinpoker is one of the fastest growing poker rooms out there, and from what I've seen and experienced, it feels generally built with players in mind. They got fast payment processing, a global player pool, and a clear focus on sustainability and community-driven development. They have been very innovative, rolling out things like the Cash Game World Championship and the recent edition of 7-2 Bounty Tables, which says a lot about the direction they're going. As part of that growth and innovation, Coinpoker is running its winter series from December 26th until January 26th, with 10 million guaranteed across the series. This is currently one of the sites I like to go and play, but hey, that's just my take. I'm sharing this for informational purposes only. If you want to take a look into it further, there are more details in the description down below.
I've heard you mention talent gets you to the table, preparation keeps you there. I think most people misunderstand what preparation takes or what it looks like at the elite level. And yeah, I'm curious to know for you, going into a big series, let's say a Triton stop, what does your preparation look like in the lead up? And even during a Triton series, how does like your preparation separate you from the competition?
So I think there are plenty of guys out there who work very hard and prepare very well for stops. And what I would say about that, so like, well, I'll give you an example of this, like what my day-to-day might look like in a lead up. I generally have a pretty intense morning study session. This usually lasts like 2.5 hours, and almost never longer than that because that's just kind of all you can really handle. And yeah, these people that say they study for 8 hours a day, it's just like, no, you don't, because that's not possible. Because if you're like truly intensely studying for a couple hours, you're just going to be totally gassed because you're effectively playing, many, many more hours of poker at a time. Say you're doing solver trainer reps. If you do 30 minutes worth of that, like you've effectively just played like 12 hours of poker worth of decisions. So if you're actually spending a lot of effort on it, it's not going to last very long. So yeah, that morning block will really be focused on things like that. And this will also be doing like the reading the manual spreadsheet type work. And then, yeah, afternoon, evening, do family stuff, work out, take care of life. And then I'll try to get like usually an hour or so at night where I'll be like mostly watching streams or just reviewing hand histories, just something that's a little less energy intensive, but it's more like kind of field research type of stuff. Fortunately, like there's like, you have like Octopi Poker has like a great replayer, and then everything's on stream, all the Triton streams, you can watch those. So I think there are plenty of people that are doing that, that they're not just directly getting outworked. But the thing that me and my circle that I think we're very strong at, and that gives us a very big edge, or not a very big edge, but an edge over other people, is we're very good at paying attention to what's important. You know what I mean? Like I get back, like kind of touching back to what we talked about before with aggression versus defensive things. Like, you might get guys who spend that whole 2-hour session being like, okay, let's play this turn barrel spot in a button versus big blind c-bet or single raise pot where flop went check, small bet call. Now I'm the in position player as the better. I'm going to study for an hour about how to get perfect mixes with all my draws. Like I'm going to get this, I'm going to bet it 70% of the time. And if I bet it 20% of the time, it's going to be a mistake. Whereas like that, you're not really gaining anything. Like having like just completely perfect mixes with your semi bluffs, like Like, what are we doing here? You're not making any extra money doing this. Where if you're spending your time, working on defensive lines or, something that's actually going to lead to like a tangible edge, that's what's important. And I think that's what me and a lot of the guys around me are good at, is paying attention and putting work in on the stuff that is the most important.
How much of an edge do you also think there is in lifestyle? You've mentioned you're someone who's super active, you're always doing sports. I'm guessing you eat well, you look after your body. I'm guessing that's more common in the high roller scene, but probably not. It's probably still an edge when you're doing it at a high level. How much do you think the kind of offside lifestyle factors impact performance?
I think it really impacts performance a lot. And the biggest thing is the detachment. I think when you are somebody who is, it's funny now because nowadays at Triton, or just the high stakes crew in general, so many guys play tennis now. So like I always, Triton Montenegro is always my favorite spot, because there's these beautiful red clay tennis courts right on property that they stay open till like 1 a.m. for us. So like if you bust a tournament, hit someone up on WhatsApp and go play tennis with them. So like, and it's just a perfect release, right? Like you just instantly feel better when you get the blood flowing and do something fun. So I think that's the biggest edge from that. I mean, on top of, when you are in good cardio shape, you just have more capillaries in your brain. You get blood flow to your brain better. So you have better willpower, I guess. You just have more mental endurance, mental stamina. But the most important thing is the release from the stress, I would say.
So high stakes hack, get into tennis, get playing early.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think in Bali, paddles become very common. I think America, pickleball, very popular as well. And yeah, those kind of racket sports where you're able to just get fully immersed in the sport itself. A lot of problem solving as well, like kind of movements around, trying to solve where the ball's going to move. Kind of detaches you from life stresses, emotions, allows you to be fully present, as well as the kind of endorphin release and serotonin you get from exercise. So yeah, I think it's a great thing to go alongside something that's really draining cognitively, like poker. So yeah, some sort of sport to unwind sounds like a real good cheat code.
Yeah.
So
And one last thing I would say about that too, is that when you live your whole life in like such a cerebral thing, right? Like poker, it's very hard to enter some type of like flow state, because it's all, what is it? There's system 1 and system 2 in your brain or whatever. That's the theory, is where system 2 is like I could be getting them backwards, but it's the one where like you're intentionally piecing together a puzzle, right? It's not intuitive. You're not letting like your intuitions necessarily take over. You're always trying to solve the puzzle. But something like tennis, it's the opposite, right? You're totally system 1, just like very easy to enter a flow state, turn your brain off, get out of your own way. So having some release to do that it's just like kind of feels like the system's washing out every time I do it,
I can also see it from the opposite perspective. Maybe you can shit your line, because I think, let's say, for example, I just busted a tournament a bit tilted, then I go to the tennis court. That's not going well as well. Maybe you make a little side bet so the downswing can also continue. There's also that element of it.
Yeah. No, I mean, fortunately for me, like my attitude towards tennis is like I picked up tennis when I was 34 years old. So I have no delusions about being great at it. I know I will never be great at it. So it's like, I'm purely doing this for fun. Like, yes, I try hard to improve at it. And like, I have a coach and I practice and everything, but like, I have no delusions about like, being like, God, I should be, I got to make that shot, like a lot of people do that, but it's just like, I'm there for fun. It's easy for me.
So the key is to leave the competitiveness at the table and see this purely as a way to, release.
Yeah. It's just like to be real about it, which is kind of funny, because I know a lot of poker players that are like very delusional about their tennis ability. It's very funny to see, because like these guys are, top 50 in the world at their competitive craft. And then they're just like a complete beginner tennis player, but just like so delusional about how good they should be at tennis. It's like you understand how hard it was to become great at poker like this. Like, you've been playing tennis for 2 years and you just dick around twice a week. Like, why would you think you'd be that good? It's very funny.
Yeah, I find it funny as well when you have people who are good at one thing and think they'll be good at something else. I think your sports background, you know what it's like to be a full-time athlete. You know who you're competing against. Yeah, it is interesting when people can't separate the two fields. Yeah, you're good at this, but you're going to suck at this forever. Don't worry about it. So for you, I've heard you speak in terms of the high roller scene, and especially early on, mentioning that you wanted to earn respect. I think actually it was you who interviewed Steve Chidwick on the same topic about early days, just wanting to kind of not be perceived as bad in the respect of your peers, kind of show you belong. How much of that drives you in terms of wanting respect of your peers, and how much of that kind of drive is you wanting to prove to yourself you belong in this environment?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's something that virtually everybody in the high stakes community that I know and have talked about this shares. And I mean, because we're talking about a world-class competition, right? Like there is no higher level. And once you really belong at this level, like you've made it, you have made it to, the Premier League. You are at the top. And poker is naturally a game that there are no stats where you can just say, look at how good I'm doing. I mean, we can't even, we can't even get big enough samples to be like, okay, this is my chip EV win rate. We can't have samples that are big enough to really even see that. So it's a very opinion-based kind of level in that, like, respect is the most important currency at this point, whether it's you want to continue staying in action because I don't have 100% of myself. I can't go on giant, like I don't have a $10 million poker bankroll to just like have all of myself. So like you have to have confidence in other people to sell action to swap with. So there is that sense of pressure and also needing to garner respect. And yeah, it's just part of the game. Like being respected, like I said, is just the main currency. And when you are somebody who's trying to break into that level, especially when you're young. And I remember being young and struggling with this, like just being so worried about what other people thought of me. It really drives you, but can also handicap you, because if you're so afraid to make a mistake, you're not going to be playing your best. There are situations where you have to be willing to look stupid, whether it's, some exploit or just, it might be good at equilibrium. You might have like some crazy bluff catcher or bluff or value bet or like, any other type of hand that might look really stupid, but like you have to have the confidence to like pull the trigger on that and like, yeah, just be willing to look stupid. And if you don't do that, you're just gonna be too passive. You're gonna get run over, and no one's ever gonna call you when you bet because you're just like never gonna have a bluff. But yeah, it's a huge battle, and like respect is very, very important.
When did you get to the point where you felt like you did belong there? Did you have to get some of the wins to kind of validate yourself, or when do you feel like you proved to yourself that you belong in this environment?
Man, I don't, maybe I haven't really fully experienced that feeling yet. It's nice to have had a profitable career over many years at this point. And, I feel like I have a lot of respect. At least that's what people, I've heard. You can never be fully sure because people don't talk about you the same way to your face as they do behind your back. So I hope people respect me, especially people outside of my group. And I get the feeling they do based on how people respond to me on the table, like how they play versus me. Like, if someone runs like some very nuanced, crazy bluff on you, that is a sign of respect, right? Because like they feel like this is a guy who I have to keep honest and I have to, play tough against, or he's, or, he has the ability to stand with me. So like that happens. And, yeah, like it's very humbling to also have access to the like such extremely talented players, because I'll hear, say, Stevie Chidwick, for example, talk about a hand he played and hear him say something and be like, wow, like you are better than me. You are a better poker player than me. Or Jason Koon, same way, Ben 86, and hear these guys talk about poker and be like, you guys are better than me. Like that's the honest truth. So it's very humbling, and a sense of belonging is hard to find because I have so much of that. But also I have to take a step back and realize like, hey, I'm getting to talk strategy with Stevie Chidwick and Jason Koon and Ben 86. And like, this is rubbing off on me, like you talk strategy with guys, it rubs off on you. So like I've said before, your support group is, the entire thing. You stand on the shoulders of the support group around you. So I think I have as good as it gets as far as support group goes. And that's what keeps me going. But I don't know if the sense of belonging is ever truly 100% there. And it's just another part of the mental battle.
What do you think you bring to the table in that group? Where you talk very highly of these other guys, right? And you learn a lot from them, but they hang out with you. Obviously, they like you as well, but you understand, like in a group, everyone contributes. What do you contribute? What are like your strengths?
Yeah, so my strengths have been historically more on the technical side. I've helped people with a lot of things like spreadsheet work, for example. Like we'll do projects together and I'll contribute some like very useful tool for the project or something like that. And the thing I'll talk about Jason because I think this is a good example of this. And Stevie fits really well into this bucket too. Is those two guys are kind of the quintessential guys that I'm talking about, where they are perfectionists. They get very hard on themselves when they make mistakes. They get very hard on themselves when they don't win. So what I've always brought to the table with those guys is like a calming presence. And I think it's one of the main reasons why Jason and I have gotten to be so close and have had such a good kind of like a synergistic effect with each other, is because our personalities were very similar, but very different at the same time. We're very similar in our sense of ambition and wanting to be great, but also he's the guy that's very, like gets very high when he wins, gets very low when he loses, whereas I'm kind of in the middle. So I've kind of been that stabilizing force for him, whereas he's been the motivating force for me. So we've had this kind of, I wouldn't say polar opposite attitudes in that sense, but very different attitudes in that sense. And we've all kind of fed off each other in very beneficial ways in that sense. And I think Stevie and Nick Petrangelo would also be very good examples of that.
Like the yin to his yang.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that visual, the motivating force and this kind of stabilizing force together. And that makes sense. It feels like those things would pair very well together. You got this energy, this drive, this ambition that wants to do a lot of stuff, but also with that, there's validity in terms of ups and downs. Then you need a stable, constant present who's always there. So yeah, it's a very good synergy there in terms of personality styles, and also what you bring to each other must work really well. So for you, in terms of going forward, you've now had a lot of success this last year. Everything's come together and you've had a lot of big scores. How do you now think about the future in terms of longevity in poker? I'm guessing a lot of those maybe insecurities around not belonging at the scene, not being good enough, have kind of been not fully vanished, but at least like there's a lot of evidence now stacking up that you're in a good place. How has that impacted how you're seeing the future, and how does longevity play into your thoughts?
Yeah, so now it's very important to work hard to maintain your position, right? Because like I said, there is a constant barrage of young, hungry kids that want to become great high stakes players. And they do, they become great players and they start coming into your games, and you have to battle with them, and you have to maintain a level of competence to stay one step ahead of them. And so it's never, the job's never done. You are constantly sharpening the sword to stay ahead of all those guys, trying to keep them out. And, but for as far as longevity and career goes, like, again, like I am something of an opportunist, and my life is certainly different now than it was 8 years ago. I have a family. I am, like I said, a little bit less motivated not less motivated, but less interested in traveling all the time for all these tournaments. So I would like to, in a perfect world, I would like to travel a little less, play more poker in Vegas where I live. And I wish I could play online, but I'm not going to move. But like my plan is to just be sensitive to the market, whatever the market is doing. And that's one of the main reasons why I am taking PLO so much more seriously nowadays is, one, not only the tournaments, especially in the United States, the PLO tournaments are just gigantic. The PLO tournaments at World Series are far bigger than their no limit counterparts at high stakes. And then there's tons of live PLO cash that goes on in the US. So maybe I'll be in a situation where I can find myself into a good PLO cash game in the next year or two. Who knows? I just want to create opportunity for myself as much as I can. And for now, the main opportunity is still just high stakes tournaments. So I'm going to continue just sharpening that sword, but who knows what it might be 6 months from now.
You've recently started sharing more of your journey, posting more on Instagram and your socials. I highly recommend people following your Instagram, some really good stuff there. What's been the motivating factor behind that? What's the kind of message you want to be sharing with people? And even come on this podcast, what are some of the things you would like the audience to take away?
Yeah, so we talked about it a little bit. Like one of the main motivators was I was getting very fed up with how just like annoying people on Twitter were shaping public opinion. At least it seemed that way for me. Like they were shaping public opinion about the high roller scene and how like what was actually going on. And it was all just such nonsense, you know? So I noticed that, well, not noticed, but it was pretty obvious that, there's like no real window into the high stakes scene. And I wanted to kind of be not only that, you know, like provide some, access because it's a cool thing to share. You know, you see a lot of things now with other sports. You have all these Netflix documentaries like Drive to Survive, Full Swing, Breakpoint, all these awesome documentaries that are very personal with these high level athletes and competitors. And I thought like poker doesn't really have anything of that. You know, everybody just kind of has streams and like a little bit of insight here and there, but there's no one that's really sharing a lot. And so yeah, those two are motivations. And then also wanted to feel like I could be a mouthpiece for the high roller player community because I think people had similar frustrations that I did, that there were these like bad opinions out there of like who we are. Like another big one that really drove me crazy that was like, I would constantly see people talking shit about Stevie Chidwick as being like this robotic, just like dork that just like was just the most uninteresting dude ever. And it's just like the furthest thing possible from the truth. Like Stevie's an incredibly funny guy, incredibly interesting. Thankfully he started posting on social media too, and people get to see this a little bit. And that really hurt me when people would just talk about him like that. Cause like, he's someone who he's not going to get on there and like clap back at him, you know, cause it's just not who he is. And he's not the only example of this. So I thought a lot of really cool and interesting things about the players were not being shared, and maybe I can do a little something to sharing that, you know?
Amazing. Well, yeah, you're doing a great job so far. And thank you so much for spending the last few hours with us. If you want to follow along your journey, see what you're posting, see what you're sharing, where's the best places to find you?
Yeah, so Instagram, it's Seth Davies 123 is where the majority goes. On X, it's, what is it? S Davies 22. There's a YouTube as well, Seth Davies 123. And I will be I would like to do some more long form stuff on YouTube. It's a little bit more work intensive. So I've mostly stuck to the short form stuff on Instagram, but yeah, the Instagram will be pretty consistent, posting stuff on there. And, but yeah, I'd like to do a little bit more long form stuff on YouTube that people might, get a little bit more out of, you know. But yeah, I'll be around. I'll be posting a lot for a while. I don't plan on stopping anytime soon.
Awesome. Well, we'll post all the links in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. We've really had a great conversation.
For sure, guys. Thanks for having me.
What a great conversation that was. Thank you, Seth. Adam, any main takeaways?
Yeah, great conversation. Really enjoyed that one. And yeah, the first thing that was coming to mind throughout the conversation was how to be healthy and competitive, like a healthy competition, where he's using the kind of drive to want to be better, to want to be a high performer, to propel him to be good at poker. Obviously, his sports background, growing up, kind of built this competitive nature. He's just talked about like basically a lot of the things you need to do as a poker player to channel a lot of energy, like dark energy, self-doubt, not feeling good about yourself, into working on your game, getting better. He talked about a lot of the high performers he's around who are very good at this as well. And he said like one of the skills that they have, which they're very good at, alongside that drive to be better, is they're also very good at recognizing what they're doing well and celebrating wins. And I think if you pair like what's an unhealthy competitive version of yourself, it's like you just want to win at all costs and you don't really look at anything else. But I think there's a line you can tread where you're still proactive, you want to be better, you want to win, you're the competitive guy, but you're also enjoying the journey and you're celebrating when things are going well and looking for how you're doing things, showing up in a good way as well. And I think Seth's a really good example of someone who is able to be competitive, but also not completely kind of Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan with examples in terms of all or nothing, win at all costs. That then led into resilience being a good skill. I think resilience and discipline, if you asked him what are your top 2 skills, that would be the answer. And resilience for him is just keep showing up when things are tough. And again, he learned that through sports. He learned that through his injuries, where he had to have a year out and not be able to play. His coach, very hard on him, his swimming coach. But resilience is that ability to keep showing up when things get tough. And as a poker player, that's your bread and butter. Because when things are going well, you're on an upswing, on a heater, yes, you'll be able to show up easily. But when you're on a downswing, months, maybe even a year or so, how do you show up during those moments? And how do you channel that energy into studying, working on yourself and getting better? And I think resilience is one of those skills where I think Seth mentioned it's an experience-based skill. You learn it through doing tough stuff. So you can't like read the textbook of how to be a resilient poker player. Yes, it's good for getting ideas, but in terms of being resilient, it's kind of daily reps, daily hard things you need to do. And I think he mentioned it in terms of practical, always when you're in a kind of negative state, take action, do something. For him, he uses exercise. Exercise is anchor. He plays tennis every day, does sport every day, because when he feels a negative feeling or something that's related to poker in terms of not feeling great, exercise is what kind of anchors him. So for yourself, find something, some outlets of action to work towards. Then alongside that, discipline in terms of keep showing up. He's someone who, no matter what's happening, he's got his routines, he's got his systems, he's got the way he prepares for tournaments and stops. And I think people might struggle to comprehend like how long it's took Seth to get the results he's had. Like he's playing the highest stakes in the world from 2019, 2020, and it's only this year he's had the kind of breakthrough. That's a lot of time doing everything right, like 4 or 5 years, keep showing up to all these live stops, maybe a little bit of chip on your shoulder, wanting to prove yourself and just not getting the wins. Everyone around you going, yeah, you're doing great. Well done, Seth. You're doing awesome. He's like, I'm still not getting the wins. And in that environment, every single stop, you see everyone else winning. I work with a lot of tournament players, and one of the hardest things around W Coop is everyone around you seems to be winning because everyone who's winning is like really loud. So you're the one left going, oh, am I the only one not winning? So for Seth, he's had 3-4 years of this, and he just keeps showing up relentlessly in the right way. So I think that's a real good lesson of no matter how long it takes, just keep showing up, just keep improving, keep getting better, and just believe in the long term. Like believe that you're going to get to the results you want. And yeah, I think Seth's like almost like a poster boy for resilience, discipline, work ethic, and just keep going when things get tough. Because I'm sure there was many patches during that where he could have took an easier route, he could have took a easier path, but he's keep showing up to the highest stakes tournaments in the world. Now this year he's had his breakthrough where everyone's like, wow, amazing. But yeah, I think as we touched on the story, there's so much depth that went into that journey of getting to where he is now, which I think we covered really well. So that were the main takeaways for me. How about you, Rene?
Many things that we could touch on, but the main thing I wanted to touch on was, I think one of the coachings that he did, it was with Chris Kirk, where before that he seemed to play poker with like a bag of tricks, right? He showed up and executed his trick, and then Chris kind of showed him like, no, sure, tricks can be fine, right? And one of the tricks, for example, that he said that mid stakes is very easy. You should just bulldozer over people because people don't defend correctly, right? So aggression just works. That was just a trick. So he shows up and executes this trick. And then he went to Triton. He said, right, in the beginning when in his high roller career, he just showed up and executed this trick. So he's like, oh wait, people don't fold. Now what? And that's kind of where this coaching from Chris Kerr came in. And in general, right, this is how I like to think about poker as well. Like it's layers, right? And where you can improve, that depends on which layer is suboptimal. The way I see it, there's like 6 layers. It actually starts before the poker, which is like your environment. Do you have your environment set up in a way that makes succeeding more likely? Or is it like destined to fail, right? Then the first one, then afterwards is, or the second one, is kind of your fundament. That's kind of what Chris Kirk taught him, right? Theoretical fundamentals about the game, the mechanics of the game, right? You could call it. And for example, he said, like one of the fundamentals is that you have to defend well, right? Get better at defending. That was very important to him, for example, when he started to play against these better guys at high rollers. Instead of trying to focus your time on getting frequency rise in aggression spot, he said you should spend most of your time on getting your defense frequencies spot on, right? Then afterwards, so we have the environment set up, we have fundamentals about the game. We can then add tricks. You know, tricks are fine. It's great to have some tricks. Like if you have a couple of good tricks, good exploits in your arsenal is great. Then the fourth one, I see like in-game adaptability. So this is, I guess, where we could put in exploits, and he kind of layered it for us, right? He said level 1, you look at a solver and figure out how people would play different from a solver. This is, again, actually also a mindset perspective or mindset switch from what you use the solver for. I think I've heard Yuri Pelek talk about this many times as well, that he also used the solver more as, okay, this is not the strategy I want to play, but this gives me great insight into how it's supposed to be. So I'm now looking at how it's supposed to be. And from that, actually, I'm only thing I'm actually learning from this is how people screw up. So I'm only improving my exploitable game, not what I'm actually want to do. I have no interest in doing this, but it's great that I now know that this is supposed to be the case. I know people don't do this. So what's the exploitative strategy? The second layer that he said is identify spots that are going to be hard. So likelihood for humans to screw up. And I think he talked about like the bluffing difference, right? Oh, this is a spot where people should give up a lot of 5 and 6 highs. Well, I don't see that in my game. So this is likely an overbluff spot, or vice versa as well, right? And if you start to get a feel, or if you start to understand which spots they are, it's again like a good exploitative layer. And level 3, he mentioned like the mood, right? So is the guy winning? Is it day 8 of Triton? Is he fatigued? Stuff like that. So then you kind of adjust based on the player specifically, either like his playing style, but also his playing style or playing style in the moment based on the state that he's in. And then the last layer that I would then add to that is like the performance layer. How good you are as a performer in poker and how well you treat poker as like your profession or like an athlete, like a sport, that kind of enhances or decreases your ability to execute both your fundament, your baseline strategy, your back of tricks, and your in-game adaptability. So I kind of see those 6 as like the layer. And I think Seth mentioned many of them. So yeah, I thought it was a great conversation. Thank you again, Seth, for coming on. Thank you, Adam, for co-hosting this podcast with me. Shout out to the sponsors, GTO Wizard, Coinpoker. Go check them out. Make sure to like and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next one.